By Carl Jung, Psychology of the Unconscious. Part 2, Chapter 5, Symbolism of the Mother and of Rebirth. The vision following the creation of the hero is described by Ms. Miller as, quote, a throng of people, unquote. This representation is known to us from dream interpretation as being, above all, the symbol of mystery. Freud thinks that this choice of symbol is determined on account of its possibility of representing the idea. The bearer of the mystery is placed in opposition to the multitude of the ignorant. The possession of the mystery cuts one off from intercourse with the rest of mankind. For a very complete and smooth rapport with the surroundings is of great importance for the management of the libido, and the possession of a subjectively important secret generally creates a general disturbance. It may be said that the whole art of life shrinks to the one problem of how the libido may be freed in the most harmless way possible. Therefore, the neurotic derives special benefit in treatment when she can at last rid herself of her various secrets. The symbol of the crowd of people, chiefly this streaming and moving mass, is, as I have often seen, substituted for the great excitement in the unconscious, especially in persons who are outwardly calm. The vision of the throng develops further. Horses emerge. A battle is fought. With Silber, I might accept the significance of this vision as belonging first of all in the functional category, because fundamentally the conception of the intermingling crowds is nothing but the symbol of the present onrush of the mass of thought. Likewise the battle, and possibly the horses, which illustrate the movement. The deeper significance of the appearance of the horses will be seen for the first time in the further course of our treatment of the mother symbolism. The following vision has a more definite and significantly more important character. Miss Miller sees a city of dreams, the Cité des Rêves. The picture is similar to one she saw a short time before on the cover of a magazine. Unfortunately, we learn nothing further about it. One can easily imagine this Cité des Rêves, a fulfilled wish dream, that is to say, something very beautiful and greatly longed for, a sort of heavenly Jerusalem, as the poet of the Apocalypse has described it. The city is a maternal symbol, a woman who fosters the inhabitants as children. It is therefore intelligible that the two mother goddesses, Rhea and Sibyl, both wear the wall crown. The Old Testament treats the cities of Jerusalem, Babel, etc. as a woman. Isaiah, 47, 1 through 5. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans. For thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstone and grind meal, uncover thy locks. Make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers. That thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. Sit thou silent, and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called the lady of the kingdoms. From Jeremiah, says of Babel, 1:12. Your mother shall be sore confronted, she that bare you shall be ashamed. Strong, unconquered cities are virgins. Colonies are sons and daughters. Cities are also whores. Isaiah says of Tyre in 8:16, quote, take a harp, go about the city, thou harlot, thou hast been forgotten, unquote, and, quote, how does it come to pass that the virtuous city has become a harlot, unquote. We come across a similar symbolism in the myth of Ogirgis, the mythical king who rules in Egyptian Thebes and whose wife was appropriately named Thebe. The Boeotian Thebes, found by Cadmus, received on that account a surname, Ogygian. This surname was also given to the Great Flood. It was called Ogygian because it occurred under the Ogigis. I'm not saying that right. This coincidence will be found later on to be This coincidence will be found later on to be hardly accidental. The fact that the city and the wife of Ogyges bear the same name indicates that somewhere a relation must exist between the city and the woman, which is not difficult to understand, for the city is identical with the woman. We meet a similar idea in Hindu lore, where Indra appears as the husband of Urvara, but Urvara means the fertile land. In a similar way, the occupancy of a country by a king was understood as marriage with the plowed land. Similar representations must have prevailed in Europe as well. Princes had to guarantee, for example, a good harvest at their ascension. The Swedish king Domaldi was actually killed on account of the failure of the harvest. In Galinda Saga 18. In the Rama Saga, the hero Rama marries Sita, the farrower of the field. Footnote: I am indebted to Dr. Abegg and Zurich for the knowledge of Indra and Urvara, Domaldi and Rama. Footnote. To the same group of ideas belongs the Chinese custom of the emperor plowing a furrow at his ascension to the throne. This idea of the soil being feminine also embraces the idea of continual companionship with the woman, a physical communication. Shiva, the phallic god, like Mahadeva and Parvati, male and female. She is like Mahadeva, male and female. He has even given one half of his body to his consort Parvati as a dwelling place. Footnote. Medieval Christianity also considered the Trinity as dwelling in the womb of the Holy Virgin. And footnote. Inman, footnote, symbolism, footnote, gives us a drawing of a Pundite in Ardhanari Isawara. One half of the god is masculine, the other half feminine, and the genitals are in continuous cohabitation. The motive of continuous cohabitation is expressed in a well-known lingam symbol, which is found everywhere in Indian temples. The base is a female symbol. Within that is the phallus. Footnote. Another form of the same motive is the Persian idea of the tree of life, which stands in the lake of rain, Yurakasha. The seeds of the tree were mixed with water, and by that the fertility of the earth was maintained. Vendidad 5:57 says, the water flows to the lake Vurashkasha down the tree Hivata, where my trees of many kinds all grow. I cause these waters to rain down as food for the pure man, as fodder for the well-born cow. Impregnation in terms of the presexual stage. Another tree of life is the white hauma, which grows in the spring, Ad Vikura, the water of life. End of footnote. The symbol approaches very closely the Grecian mystic phallic basket and chests. Compare this with the Eleusinian mysteries. The chest or box is here a female symbol, that is, a mother's womb. This is a very well-known conception in the old mythologies. Footnote. Excellent examples of this are given in the work of Rank, quote, The Myth of the Birth of the Hero, translated by William White. End of footnote. The chest basket or little basket with its precious contents was thought of as floating on the water, a remarkable inversion of the natural fact that the child floats in the amniotic fluid and that this is in the uterus. This inversion brings about a great advantage for sublimation, for it creates enormous possibilities of application of the myth-weaving fantasy, that is to say, for the annihilation to the sun cycle. The annexation to the sun, not annihilation, for the annexation to the sun cycle. The sun floats over the sea like an immortal god, which every evening is immersed in the maternal water and is born again renewed in the morning. Frobenius says, quote, Perhaps in connection with the blood-red sunset, the idea occurs that here a birth takes place, the birth of a young son. The question then arises inevitably, whence comes the paternity? How does the woman become pregnant? And since this woman symbolizes the same idea as the fish, which means the sea, because we proceed from the assumptions that the sun descends into the sea as well as rises out of it, Thus the curious primitive answer is that the sea has previously swallowed the old sun. Consequently, the resulting myth is that the woman sea has formerly devoured the sun and now brings a new sun into the world, and thus she has become pregnant. End of quote. All these seed gods are sun symbols. They are enclosed in a chest or an ark for the night journey of the sea, quote-unquote, night journey of the sea, Frobenius. Often together with a woman, again an inversion of the actual situation, but in support of the motive of continuous cohabitation, which we have met above. During the night journey on the sea, the sun god is enclosed in the mother's womb, oftentimes threatened by dangers of all kinds. Instead of many individual examples, I will content myself with reproducing the scheme which Frobenius has constructed with numberless myths of this sort. And here we have a diagram which goes from west to east. On the west is to devour, on the east is heat, hair, to slip out, to open, and to land. And moving from east to west, the sea journey starts first with the sea journey and then goes to set on fire or to cut off the heart, which is at the bottom, the sea journey, and then to set on fire or to cut off the heart. So, that's the diagram. So, Frobenius gives the following legend to illustrate this. Quote, a hero is devoured by a water monster in the west to devour. The animal carries him within him to the east, the sea journey. Meanwhile, he kindles a fire in the belly of the monster to set on fire. Since he feels hungry, he cuts off pieces of the hanging heart and to cut off the heart. Soon after, he notices that the fish glides upon the dry land to land. He immediately begins to cut open the animal from within outwards to open, and then he slides out to slip out. In the fish's belly, it has been so hot that all his hair has fallen out. Heat hair. The hero frequently frees all who were previously devoured, devour all, and all now slide out or slip out. End of quote. A very close parallel is Noah's journey during the flood, in which all living creatures die. Only he and the life guarded by him are brought to a new birth. In the Polynesian legend, Frobenius, it is told that the hero in the belly of the kingfish took his weapon and cut open the fish's belly. Quote, he slid out and he saw a splendor, and he sat down and reflected. I wonder where he am, he said. Then the sun rose with a bound and turned from one side to the other. End of quote. The sun has again slipped out. Frobenius mentions from the Ramayana myth of the ape Hanuman, who represents the sun hero. Sun in which Hanuman hurries through the air throws a shadow upon the sea. The sea monster notices this, and through this draws Hanuman towards itself. When the latter sees that the monster is about to devour him, he stretches out his figure immeasurably. The monster assumes the same gigantic proportions, and as he does that, Hanuman becomes as small as a thumb and slips into the great body of the monster and comes out the other side. In another part of the poem, it is said that he came out from the right ear of the monster, like Rabelais' Gargantua, who also was born from the mother's ear. Quote, Hanuman thereupon resumes his flight and finds a new obstacle in another sea monster, which is in the mother of Rahus, the sun-devouring demon. The latter draws Hanuman's shadow to her in the same way. Footnote, shadows probably mean the soul, the nature of which is the same as libido. Compare this, part 1. End of footnote. Hanuman again has recourse to his earlier stratagem, becoming small and slips into her body, but hardly is he there that he grows into a gigantic mass, swells up, tears her, kills her, and in this way makes his escape. End of footnote. End of quote. Thus we understand why the Indian fire-bringer Martirikvan is called, quote, the one swelling in the mother, unquote. The ark, little chest, little box, chest, cask, vessel, etc., is a symbol of the womb, just as the sea into which the sun sinks for rebirth. From this circle of ideas, we understand the mythologic statements about Ogirigis. It is who possesses the mother, the city, who is united with the mother. Therefore, under him came the great flood, for it is a typical fragment of the sun myth that the hero, when united with the woman, attained with difficulty, is exposed in a cask and thrown into the sea, and then lands for a new life in a distant shore. The middle part, the knight's journey on the sea, in the Ark, is lacking in the tradition of Ogirgis, a footnote. But I must mention that Nork, Reerworterbachs, pleads that Thebes is the ship city. His arguments are much attacked. From among his arguments, I emphasize a quotation from Diodorus 1:57, according to which Sesostris, whom Noah associates with Xixostros, which Nork associates with Xixostros, has consecrated to the highest god in Thebes a vessel 280 ells long. In the dialogue of Lucius, the night journey in the sea was used as an erotic figure of speech. Quote, Haec inum citarcian navigatem Veneris indignit sola, ut in nocte per vigili et oleo lucerna et vino calix abundit. Translated, for the ship of Venus needs this provision in order that during the night the lamp may abound with oil and the goblet with wine. The union of the coitus motive with the motive of pregnancy is found in the, quote, night journey of the sea of Osiris, who in his mother's wombs copulated with his sister. End of footnote. But the rule in the mythology is that the typical parts of a myth can be united in all conceivable variations, which adds greatly to the extraordinary difficulty of the interpretation of a particular myth without knowledge of all the others. The meaning of this cycle of myths mentioned here is clear. It is the longing to attain rebirth through the return to the mother's womb, that is to say, to become immortal as the sun. This longing for the mother is frequently expressed in our holy scriptures. Footnote. Very illuminating psychologically is the method and the manner in which Jesus treats his mother, when he harshly repels her. Just as strong, as intense as this, has the longing for her imago grown in his unconscious. It is surely not an accident that the name Mary accompanies him through his life. Compare the utterance of Matthew 10:35, quote, I have come to set a man at variance with his father, a daughter with her mother. He who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me, unquote. This direct hostile purpose, which calls to mind the legendary role of Bertrand de Born, is directed against the incestuous bond and compels man to transfer his libido to the Savior, who, dying, returned to his mother, and rising again, is their hero Christ. End of footnote. I recall particularly the place of the Epistle of the Galatians, where it is said, 4:26, quote, But Jerusalem which is above is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, Rejoice, thou barren that breaketh not, break forth and cry, thou that travailest not, for the desolate hath many more children than she hath a husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. But he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit. Even so it is now. Nevertheless, what saith the Scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free. In chapter 5. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free. End of quote. The Christians are the children of the city above, a symbol of the mother, not sons of the earthly city mother, who is to be cast out. For those born after the flesh are opposed to those born after the Spirit, who are not born from the mother in the flesh, but from a symbol for the mother. One must again think of the Indians at this point, who say that the first people proceeded from the sword hilt and a shuttle. The religious thought is bound up with the compulsion to call the mother no longer mother, but city, source, sea, etc. This compulsion can be derived from the need to manifest an amount of libido bound up with the mother, but in such a way that the mother is represented by or concealed in a symbol. The symbolism of the city we find well developed in the revelations of John, where two cities played a great part, one of which is insulated and cursed by him, the other greatly desired. We read in Revelations, and this is 17:1, quote, "Come hither, I will shew upon thee the judgment of a great whore that sitteth on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit on a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, and having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colors, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication." Footnote 2, golden cup, genitals. End of footnote. "And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw this woman drunken with the blood of saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I wondered with a great admiration." End of quote. Here follows an interpretation of the vision unintelligible to us, from which we can only emphasize the point with the 7 heads of the dragon means the 7 hills upon which the woman sits. Footnote to 7 heads. The horns of the dragon have the following attributes, quote, "They will prey upon woman's flesh, and they will burn with fire," unquote. The horn, a phallic emblem, is in the unicorn the symbol of the Holy Ghost, Logos. The unicorn is hunted by the archangel Gabriel and driven into the lap of the Virgin, by which was understood the Immaculate Conception. But the horns are also sun's rays, therefore the sun gods are often horned. The sun phallus is the prototype of the horn, sun wheel, and phallus wheel. Therefore the horn is the symbol of power. Here the horn burns with fire and preys upon the flesh. One recognizes in this a representation of the pains of hell, where souls are burnt by the fire of the libido, unsatisfied longing. The harlot is consumed or burned by unsatisfied longing, or libido. Prometheus suffers a similar fate when the eagle, sunbird libido, tears his intestines. One might say that he is pierced by the horn. I refer to the phallic meaning of the spear. End of footnote. So, this is probably a distinct allusion to Rome, the city whose temporal power oppressed the world at the time of the Revelation. The waters upon which the woman, the mother, sits are peoples and throngs and nations and tongues. This also seems to refer to Rome, for she is the mother of peoples and possesses all lands. Just as in common speech, for example, colonies are called daughters, so the people subject to Rome are like members of a family subject to the mother. In another version of the picture, the kings of the people, namely the fathers, commit fornication with this mother. Revelation continues in 28:2. Quote, "And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habituation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." End of quote. Thus this mother does not only become the mother of all abomination, but is also, in truth, the receptacle of all that is wicked and unclean. The birds are images of souls. Footnote. In the Babylonian underworld, for example, the souls have a feathery coat like that of birds. See the Gilgamesh epic. End of footnote. The birds are the images of souls. Therefore, this means all souls of the condemned and evil spirits. Thus the mother becomes Hecate, the underworld, the city of the damned itself. We recognize easily in the ancient idea of the woman on the dragon the above-mentioned representation of Echinida, the mother of the infernal horrors. Footnote to the dragon. In the 14th century Gospel at Bruges, there is a miniature where the womanly lovely, as the Mother of God, stands with half her body in a dragon. Footnote, end of footnote. Babylon is the idea of the terrible mother who seduces all people to whoredom with devilish temptation and makes them drunk with her wine. This intoxicating drink stands in the closest relation to fornication, for it is also a libido symbol, as we have already seen in the parallel of fire and sun. After the fall and curse of Babylon, we find in Revelation 19, 6-7, the hymn which leads from the under half to the upper half of the mother, where now everything is possible, which would be impossible without the repression of incest. Quote, Hallelujah, the Lord God omniscient reigneth. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. So footnotes for the marriage of the Lamb. To arnion, little ram, diminutive of the obsolete arin, a ram. In Theophrastus it occurs with the meaning of young scion. The related word arnis designates a festival annually celebrated in honor of Linos, in which the Linos, the lament called Linos, was sung with a lamentation for Linos, the newborn son of Psamathe and Apollo, torn to pieces by dogs. The mother had exposed her child out of fear of her father Crotopos, but for revenge Apollo sent a dragon, Peony, into Crotopos' land. The oracle of Delphi commanded a yearly lament by women and maidens for the dead Linos. A part of the honor was given to Psamathe. The Limos lament is, as Herodotus shows, identical to the Phoenician, Cyprian, and Egyptian custom of Adonis Tammuz lament. As Herodotus observes, Linos is called Mineros in Egypt. Brugsch points out that Maneros comes from the Egyptian cry of lamentation, Man-chu, come to the call. Poin is characterized by her tearing the children from the womb of all mothers. This ensemble of motives is found again in the Apocalypse 12, 1-5, where it treats of the woman whose child was threatened by the dragon, but snatched away into the heaven. The child murder of Herod is an anthropomorphism of this primitive idea. The lamb means the son. Dietrich refers for an explanation of this passage to the myth of Apollo and Python, which he reproduces as follows, quote, To Python, son of the earth, the great dragon, it was prophesied that the son of Leto would kill him. Leto was pregnant by Zeus, but Hera brought it about that she could give birth only where the sun did not shine. When Python saw that Leto was pregnant, he began to pursue her in order to kill her, but Boreas brought Leto to Poseidon. The latter brought her to Ortygia and covered the land with the waves of the sea. When Python did not find Leto, he returned to Parnassus. Leto brought forth upon the island thrown up by Poseidon. The fourth day after the birth, Apollo took revenge and killed the python. The birth upon the hidden island belongs to the motive of the, quote, night journey on the sea, unquote. The typical character of the island fantasy has for the first time been correctly perceived by Reuchlin. A beautiful parallel for this is to be found, together with the necessary incestuous fantasy material, in H.D. Stackpool's The Blue Lagoon, a parallel to Paul and Virginia. So end of that footnote. So we'll go on with the quote from Revelation. I'll start from the beginning. Hallelujah, the Lord of God omniscient reigneth. Let us be glad and rejoice, and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of saints. And he saith unto me, Right, blessed are they which are called upon the marriage supper of the Lamb. End of quote. The Lamb is the Son of Man who celebrates his marriage with the woman, quote-unquote woman. Who the woman is remains obscure at first, but Revelation 21:9 shows us which woman is the bride and the Lamb's wife. Quote, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. Footnote, Revelation 22, quote, And the holy city, the new Jerusalem, I saw coming down from the heaven of God, prepared as a bride, adorned in for her bridegroom. End of quote, end of footnote. So I'll start again. Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. End of quote. It is evident from this quotation, after all that goes before, that the city, the heavenly bride, who is here promised to the Son, is the mother. Footnote: the legend of Skatideva in Somadeva Bhuta relates that the hero, after he had escaped from being devoured by a huge fish, terrible mother, finally sees the golden city and marries his beloved princess, Frobenius. End of footnote. In Babylon, the impure maid was cast out, according to the epistle of the Galatians, so that here in heavenly Jerusalem the mother bride may be attained the more surely. It bears witness to the most delicate psychologic perception that the fathers of the Church who formulated the canons preserved this bit of symbolic significance in the Christ mystery. It is a treasury house for the fantasies and myth materials which underlie primitive Christianity. Footnote: in the apocryphal Acts of St. Thomas, 2nd century, the Church is taken to be the Virgin Mother Spouse of Christ. In an invocation of the Apostle it is said, Come, holy name of Christ, thou who art above all names. Come, power of the highest and greatest mercy. Come, disperser of the greatest blessings. Come, gracious Mother. Come, economy of the masculine. Come, woman, thou who disclosest the hidden mysteries. In another invocation it is said, Come, greatest mercy. Come, spouse, literally community, of the male. Come, woman, thou who knowest the mystery of the elect. Come, woman, thou who showest the hidden things, and who revealest the unspeakable things. Holy dove, thou who bringest forth the twin nesting. Come, mysterious mother, etc. The connection of the Church with the mother is not to be doubted, also the conception of the mother as spouse. The Virgin is necessarily introduced to hide the incest idea. The, quote, community with the male, unquote, points to the motive of the continuous cohabitation. The, quote, twin nestings, quote, unquote, refers to the old legend that Jesus and Thomas were twins. It plainly expresses the motive of the Dioscursi. Therefore, doubting Thomas had to place his finger in the wound at the side. Zinzendorf has correctly perceived the sexual significance of this symbol that hints at the androgynous nature of the primitive being, the libido. Compare the Persian legend of the twin trees Meshkia and Meskiane, as well as the motive of the Dioscursi and the motive of cohabitation. End of footnote. The further attributes which were heaped upon the heavenly Jerusalem made its significance as mother overwhelmingly clear. Quote, and he shewed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manners of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of nations, and there shall be no more curse. End of the quote. In this quotation we come upon the symbol of the waters, which we found in the mention of Ogirgis in connection with the city. The maternal significance of water belongs to the clearest symbolism in the realm of mythology. Footnote. Compare Freud, dream interpretation, also Abram, dream and myths. End of footnote. So that the ancients could say, Hey Thalassa, tis gen esaus sum bolon, which is translated as the sea is a symbol of birth. From the water comes life. Footnote. Isaiah 48. Yeah. Hear ye, O house of Jacob, which are called by the name of Israel, and come forth out of the waters of Judah. End of footnote. Therefore, of the two gods which here interest us the most, Christ and Mithra, the latter was born beside a river, according to the representations, while Christ experienced his new birth in the Jordan. Moreover, he was born from the Nigi. Footnote. The Greek materia, uli, which means wood and forest, really means moist, from the Indo-Germanic root su in vu, or u, to make wet, to have rain. Uitos, rain. Iranian suth, sap, birth, fruit. Sanskrit sura equals brandy. Sutas equals pregnancy. Sute, suyate equals to generate. Sutas equals sun. Suras equals soma. Uios equals sun. Sanskrit sunus, Gothic sunus. End of footnote. So, he is born from the Nigi, and then we had that footnote, the Semi-Pertini Fons Amoris, the Mother of God, who by the heathen Christian legend was made a nymph of the spring. The spring is also found in Mithricism. A Pannonian dedication reads Fonti Perenni. An inscription in Apulia is dedicated to the Fons Aeterni. In Persia, Ardvikura, in the well of the water of life. Ardvikura Anahita is a goddess of water and love, just as Aphrodite is born from foam. The Neo-Persians designate the planet Venus and a nubile girl by the name Nahib. In the temples of Ananitas, there exist prostitute hierodules, or harlots. In the Sakiain, in honor of Anaitis, there occurred ritual combats, as in the festival of the Egyptian Ares and his mother. In the Vedas, the waters are Matrita Ma, the most maternal. All that is living rises, as does the sun, from the water, and at evening plunges into the water. Born from the springs, the rivers, the seas, at death, man arrives at the waters of the Styx, in order to enter upon, quote, the night journey on the sea, unquote. The wish is that the black water of death might be the water of life, that death, with its cold embrace, might be the mother's womb, just as the sea devours the sun, but brings it forth again out of the maternal womb. The Jonah motive. Footnote. Koi mi mar means cohabitation. Soi mi tiarion, bedchamber, hence coemetrium equals cemetery, enclosed fenced place. And a footnote. Life believes not in death. Quote, in the flood of life, in the torrent of deeds, I toss up and down, I am blown to and fro, cradle and grave, an eternal sea, a changing web, a glowing life. End of quote from Goethe from Faust. That Xulon Xauris, the wood of life, or the tree of life, is a maternal symbol would seem to follow from the previous deductions. The etymologic connections of Iao, Yuli, Uos in the Indo-Germanic root suggests the blending of the meanings in the underlying symbolism of mother and of generation. The tree of life is probably, first of all, a fruit-bearing genealogic tree, that is, a mother image. Countless myths prove the derivation of man from trees. Many myths show how the hero is enclosed in the maternal tree. Thus, dead Osiris in the column, Adonis in the myrtle, etc. Numerous female divinities were worshipped as trees, from which resulted the cult of the holy groves and trees. It is of transparent significance when Attis castrates himself under a pine tree, i.e., he does it because of his mother. Goddesses were often worshipped in the form of a tree or of a wood. Thus, Juno of Thespai was a branch of a tree, Juno of Samos was a board, Juno of Argos was a column. The Carian Diana was an uncut piece of wood, Athena of Lindus was a polished column. Tertullian calls a series of pharaohs, quote, rudus pallas et informe lingam sin effigie, unquote. Athenaeus remarks of Latona at Delos that she is Xulinon amorphon, a shapeless piece of wood. Footnote. Note real Waterbeck. End footnotes. Tertullian calls an Attic palace crucis stipes, a wooden pail or mast. The wooden pail is phallic, and as the name suggests, phallus, phallus. The phallus is a pail, a ceremonial lingam carved out of figwood, as are all Roman statues of Priapus. Phallus means a projection or centerpiece on the helmet, later called xaunos, just as anaphalla anatiasis signifies bald-headedness on the forepart of the head, and phallaxros signifies bald-headedness in regard to the phallus xaunos of the helmet. A semi-phallic meaning is given to the upper part of the head as well. Footnote: in the myth of Celebes, a dove maiden, who was caught in the manner of the swan maiden myth, was called Utahagi after a white hair which grew on its crown and in which there was a magic strength. End of footnote. Phallinos has been, besides phallos, the significance of wooden, phalla agarma, cylinder, phallagza, a round beam. The Macedonian battle array, distinguished by its powerful impetus, is called phallags. Moreover, the finger joint, footnote, referring to the phallic symbol for the finger, see the remarks about dacti, Part 2, Chapter 1. I mention at this place the following from the Bacchari myth, quote, Ni mag Nero devoured 2 finger bones, many of which were in the house, because Okra had used them for his arrowheads, and killed many Bacchari whose flesh he ate. The woman became pregnant from the finger bone, and only from this, not from Okra. End of footnote. So the finger joint is called phallags, phallani, or phallena. It is a whale. Now, phallos appears with the meaning shining bright. The Indo-Germanic root is bal, to bulge or to swell. Footnote: further proof for this is Prelwitz. End of footnote. Who does not think of Faust? Quote, it grows, it shines, increases in my hand. Unquote. This is primitive libido symbolism, which shows how immediate is the connection between phallic libido and light. The same relations are found in the Rigveda in Rudi's utterances. Rigveda 1, 114.3, quote, May we obtain your favor, thou man ruling, O urinating Ruda, unquote. I refer here to the previous mentioned phallic symbolism of Ruda in the Upanishads, quote, We call for help below to the flaming Ruda, to the one bringing the sacrifice, he who encircles and wanderer in the vault of heaven, to the seer. He who opens up the sweet, who listens to our calls, the ruddy one, with a beautiful helmet. May he not give over to us the powers of jealousy. I have been rejoiced by the bull connected with Marat, the supplicating one with a strong force of life. Sound the pure song of praise to the ruddy bull, to the white shining one. Worship the flaming one with honor. We sing of the shining being Ruda. May Ruda's missile, or arrow, not be used on us. May the great displeasure of the Shining One pass us by. Unbend the firm bow, or hard arrow, for the princess, thou who blessest with the waters of thy body generative strength. Be gracious to our children and our grandchildren. Footnote. Steik, Dirgot Ruda in Rigveda. End of footnote. In this way, so it was the end of the quote too. In this way, we pass from the realm of mother symbolism imperceptibly into the realm of male phallic symbolism. This element also lies in the tree, even in the family tree, as is distinctly shown by the medieval family trees. From the first ancestor, there grows upward, in the place of the membrane virilae, the trunk of the great tree. The bisexual symbolic character of the tree is intimated by the fact that in Latin trees have a masculine termination and a feminine gender. Footnote. The fig tree is a phallic tree. It is noteworthy that Dionysus planted a fig tree at the entrance of Hades, just as phalli are placed on graves. The cypress tree, consecrated to Aphrodite, grew to be entirely a token of death because it was placed at the door of the house of death. End of footnote. The feminine, especially the maternal, meaning of the forest, and the phallic significance of trees and dreams is well known. I mention an example. It concerns a woman who had always been nervous and who, after many years of marriage, became ill as a result of the typical retention of libido. She had the following dream after she had learned to know a young man of many engaging free opinions who were very pleasing to her. She found herself in a garden where stood a remarkable exotic tree with strange red fleshy flowers or fruits. She picked them and ate them. Then, to her horror, she felt that she had been poisoned. This dream idea may easily be understood by means of the antique or poetic symbolism, so I can spare information as to the analytic material. The double significance of the tree is readily explained by the fact that such symbols are not to be understood anatomically but psychologically as libido symbols. Therefore, it is not permissible to interpret the tree on account of its similar form as directly phallic. It can also be called a woman or the uterus of the mother. The uniformity of the significance lies alone in the similarity to the libido. Footnote. Therefore, the tree at times is also representative of the sun. A Russian riddle related to me by Dr. Van Ofuygensen reads, quote, "What is the tree which stands in the middle of the village and is visible to every cottage?" Answer, the sun and its light. The Norwegian riddle reads, quote, "A tree stands on the mountains of Billings, it bends over a lake, its branches shine like gold. Gold. You won't guess that today." Unquote. Oh, no, not end quote. In the evening the daughter of the sun collected the golden branches, which had been broken from the wonderful oak. Bitterly wept the little son in the apple orchard. From the apple tree has fallen the golden apple. Do not weep, little son. God will make another of gold, of bronze, of silver. There's the end of the quote. The picking of the apple tree from the paradise tree may be compared with the fire theft, the drawing back of the libido from the mother. See the explanation which follows concerning the specific deed of heroes. End of footnote. One loses one's way in one cul-de-sac after another by saying that this is the symbol substituted for the mother and that for the penis. In this realm there is no fixed significance of things. The only reality here is the libido, for which all that is perishable is merely a symbol. It is not the physical, actual mother, but the libido of the sun, S-O-N, the object of which was once the mother. We take mythological symbols much too concretely and wonder at every step about the endless contradictions. These contradictions arise only because we constantly forget that in the realm of fantasy, feeling is all. Whenever we read, therefore, quote, "His mother was a wicked sorcerer," the translation is as follows. The son is in love with her, namely, he is unable to detach his libido from the mother imago. He therefore suffers from incestuous resistance. Reader's commentary to the statement that whenever somebody has a dream about the wicked mother, that the son is in love with the mother, that comes fast on the heels of the statement that there is no fixed meaning in anything and that things have multiple meanings. I just find it really interesting that as soon as he says there's nothing fixed, then he says that whenever you hear this fantasy, that it means this. I think that there's just an interesting paradox right there. So, and continuing with the reading. The symbolism of water and trees, which are met as further attributes in the symbol of the city, also refer to that amount of libido which unconsciously is fastened to the mother imago. In certain parts of Revelation, the unconscious psychology of religious longing is revealed, namely the longing for the mother. Footnote. The relation of the son or to the mother was the psychologic basis of many religions. In the Christian legend, the relation of the son to the mother is extraordinarily clear. Robertson evangelical Ms., has hit upon the relation of Christ to the Marys, and he conjectures that this relation probably refers to an old myth, quote, where a god of Palestine, perhaps the name Joshua, appears in the changing relation of lover and son towards the mythical Mary. This is the natural process in the oldest theosophy, and one which appears with variations in the myths of Mithra, Adonis, Attis, Osiris, and Dionysus, all of whom were brought into relation or combination with mother goddesses, and who appear either as a consort or a feminine eidolon, insofar as the mother and consorts were identified as occasion afforded. End of footnote. The expectation of revelation ends in the mother, kai pan xatathema oix estin eti, quote, and there shall be no more curse, end of quote. There shall be no more sins, no repression, no disharmony with oneself, no guilt, no fear of death, and no pain of separation more. Thus Revelation echoes the same radiant mystical harmony which is caught again 2,000 years later and expressed poetically in the last prayer of Dr. Marinus. Penitents, quote, penitents, look up, elate, there she beams salvation, gratefully to blessed fate, grow in recreation, be our souls as they may, dedicate to thee, Virgin, Holy Mother, Queen, Goddess, gracious be, Goethe, Faust. End of quote. One principal question arises at the sight of this beauty and greatness of feeling, that is, whether the primary tendency compensated by religion is not too narrowly understood as incestuous. I have previously observed in regard to this that I consider the, quote, resistance opposed to libido, unquote, as in a general way coincident with the incest prohibition. I must leave open for the present the definition of the psychological incest conception. However, I will here emphasize the point that it is most especially the totality of the son myth which proves to us that the fundamental basis of the incestuous desire does not aim at a cohabitation, but at the special thought of becoming a child again, of turning back to the parent's protection, of coming into the mother once again in order to be born again. But incest stands in the path to this goal, that is to say, the necessity of, in some way, again, gaining entrance into the mother's womb. One of the simplest ways would be to impregnate the mother and to reproduce oneself identically. But here the incest prohibition interferes. Therefore, the myths of the Son, or of rebirth, teem with all possible proposals as to how incest can be evaded. A very simple method of avoidance is to transform the mother into another being, or to rejuvenate her after birth has occurred, to have her disappear again, or to have her change back. Footnote to rejuvenating the mother. Rank has pointed out a beautiful example of this in the myth of the Swan Maiden. End of footnote. It is not incestuous cohabitation which is desired, but the rebirth which now is attained most readily through cohabitation. But this is not the only way, although perhaps the original one. The resistance to the incest prohibition makes the fantasy inventive. For example, it was attempted to impregnate the mother by means of a magical charm of fertility to wish for a child. Attempts in this respect remain in the stage of mythical fantasies, but they have one result, and this is to exercise of the fantasy, which gradually produces a path through the creation of fantastic possibilities in which the libido is taking an active part and can flow off. Thus the libido becomes spiritualized in an imperceptible manner. The power which always wishes evil, quote unquote, which always wishes evil, unquote, thus creates a spiritual life. Therefore, in religions, this course is now raised to a system. On that account, it is exceedingly instructive to see how religion takes pains to further these symbolic transferences. Footnote. Muther says in the chapter, quote, the first Spanish classic, Take once wrote, "Sexuality is the great mystery of our being. Sensuality is the first moving wheel in our machinery. It stirs our being and makes it joyous and living. Everything we dream of as beautiful and noble is included here. Sexuality and sensuousness are the spirit of music, of painting, and of all art. All wishes of people rotate around this center like moths around a burning light. The sense of beauty and the feeling of art are only other expressions of it. They signify nothing more than the impulse of people towards expression. I consider devotedness itself to be a diverted channel of the sexual desire." Quote unquote. Here it is openly declared that one should never forget, when judging the ancient ecclesiastical art, that the effort to efface the boundaries between earthly and divine love, to blend into each other imperceptibly, has always been the guiding thought, the strongest factor in the propagation of the Catholic Church. End of footnote. The New Testament furnishes us with excellent example in regarding this. Nicodemus, in the speech regarding rebirth, cannot forbear understanding the matter very realistically. John 3:4. Quote, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born?" Unquote. But Jesus endeavors to raise into purity this sensuous view of Nicodemus's mind, molded in materialistic heaviness, and announces to him, really the same, yet not the same. Quote, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man to be born of water and of spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, Ye must be born again. The wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh, and whither it goeth. So it is everyone is born of the Spirit." End of quote. To be born of water means simply to be born from the mother's womb. To be born of the Spirit means to be born from the fructifying breath of the wind. This we learn from the Greek text, where spirit and wind are expressed by the same word, pneuma. To gegen nimenon extaus sarxos sarxe estin, kai to geg nimenon extu pneumatos pneuma estin, to pneuma upoi thelein pain. Translated, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. The Spirit bloweth where it listeneth. End of footnote. End of translation. This symbolism rose from the same need as that which produced the Egyptian legend of the vultures, the mother symbol. They were only females and were fertilized by the wind. One recognizes very clearly the ethical demand as the foundation of these mythologic assertions. Thou must say of the mother that she was not impregnated by a mortal in an ordinary way, but by spiritual beings in an unusual manner. This demand stands in strict opposition to the real truth. Therefore, the myth is a fitting solution. One can say that it was a hero who died and who was born again in a remarkable manner, and in this way attained immortality. The need which this demand asserts is evidently a prohibition against a definite fantasy concerning the mother. A son may naturally think that a father has generated him in a carnal way, but not that he himself impregnated the mother and so caused himself to be born again into renewed youth. This incestuous fantasy, which for some reason possesses an extraordinary strength, and therefore appears as a compulsory wish, is repressed and confronted, and conforming to the above demand, under certain conditions, expresses itself again symbolically concerning the problem of birth, or rather concerning individual rebirth from the mother. Footnote 2. Extraordinary strength. We shall not discuss here the reasons for the strength of the fantasy, but it does not seem difficult for me to imagine what sort of powers are hidden behind the above formula. So, end of footnote. In Jesus' challenge to Nicodemus, we clearly recognize this tendency. Quote, "Think not carnally, or thou art carnal, but think symbolically, then thou art spirit." Unquote. It is evident how extremely educative and developing this compulsion towards symbolism can be. Nicodemus would remain fixed in low commonplaces if he did not succeed in raising himself through symbols above this repressed incestuous desire. As right righteous Philistine of culture, he probably was not very anxious for this effort, because men seem really to remain satisfied in repressing the incestuous libido, and at best to express it by some modest religious exercise. Yet it seems to be important, on the other side, that man should not merely renounce and repress and thereby remain firmly fixed in the incestuous bond, but he should redeem these dynamic forces which lie bound up in incest in order to fulfill himself. For man needs his whole libido to fill out the boundaries of his personality, and then, for the first time, he is in a condition to do his best. The paths by which man may manifest his incestuously fixed libido seem to have been pointed out by the religious mythologic symbols. On this account, Jesus teaches Nicodemus, quote, "Thou thinkest of thy incestuous wish for rebirth, but thou must think that thou art born from the water, and that thou art generated by the breath of the wind, and in this way thou shalt share in eternal life." End of quote. Footnote to breath of the wind. Lactantius said, quote, "When we all know that it is customary for certain animals to conceive through wind and breath of air, why should anyone consider it miraculous for a virgin to be impregnated by the Spirit of God?" End of footnote. Thus, the libido, which lies inactive in the incestuous bond, repressed, and in fear of the law and the avenging Father God, can be led over into sublimation through the symbol of baptism, birth from water, and of generation, spiritual birth, through the symbol of the descent of the Holy Ghost. Thus man becomes a child. Footnote. Therefore the strong emphasis upon affiliation in the New Testament. Thus man becomes a child again and is born into a circle of brothers and sisters. But his mother is the, quote, communion of the saints. The Church and his circle of brothers and sisters is humanity, with whom he is united anew in the common inheritance of the primitive symbol. It seems that at the time in which Christianity had its origin, this process was especially necessary. For that period, as a result of the incredible contrast between slavery and the freedom of the citizens and masters, had entirely lost the consciousness of the common bond of humankind. One of the next and most essential reasons for the energetic regression to the infantile in Christianity, which goes hand in hand with the revival of the incest problem, was probably to be found in the far-reaching depreciation of women. At that time, sexuality was so easily attainable that the result could only be very excessive depreciation of the sexual object. The existence of personal values was first discovered by Christianity, and there are many people who have not discovered it even in the present day. However, the depreciation of the sexual object hinders the outflow of that libido which cannot be satisfied by sexual activity, because it belongs to an already desexualized higher order. If it were not so, a Don Juan could never be neurotic, but the contrary is the case. For how can those higher valuations be given to a worthless, despised object? Therefore the libido, after having seen a Helen in every woman for so long a time, sets out on a search for the difficult to obtain, the worshipped, and perhaps unattainable goal, and which in the unconscious is the mother. Therefore the symbolic needs, based on the incest resistance, arises again in an increased degree, which promptly transforms the beautiful sinful world of the Olympian gods into an incomprehensible, dreamlike, dark mystery, which, with their ascensions of symbols and obscure meaningful texts, removes us far from the religious feelings of the Roman Greco world. When we see how much trouble Jesus took to make acceptable to Nicodemus the symbolic perception of things, that is to say, really a repression and veiling over of the actual facts, and how important it was for the history of civilization in general that people thought and still think in this way, then we understand the revolt which is raised everywhere against the psychologic discovery of the true background of the neurotic or normal symbolism. Always and everywhere we encounter the odious realm of sexuality, which represents to all righteous people of today something defiled. However, less than 2,000 years have passed since the religious cult of sexuality was more or less openly in full bloom. To be sure, they were heathen and did not know better, but the nature of religious powers does not change from cycle to cycle. If one has once received an effectual impression of the sexual contents of the ancient cults, and if one realizes oneself that the religious experience, that is, the union with the God of antiquity, so here a footnote on union, the mystic feelings of the nearness of God, the so-called personal inner experience, so that is, the union with the inner God of antiquity was understood by antiquity as a more or less concrete coitus, then truly one can no longer fancy that the motor forces of a religion have suddenly become wholly different since the birth of Christ. Exactly the same thing has occurred as with the hysteric, who at first indulges in some quite unbeautiful infantile sexual manifestations, and afterwards develops a hyper-aesthetic negation in order to convince everyone of his special purity. Christianity, with its repression of the manifest sexuality, is the negative of the ancient sexual cult. The original cult has changed its tokens. Footnote: the sexual mawkishness is everywhere apparent in the lamb symbolism and the spiritual love songs to Jesus, the bridegroom of the soul. End of footnote. One only needs to realize how much of the gay paganism, even to the inclusion of the unseemly gods, has been taken into the Christian church. Thus the old indecent Priapus celebrated a gay festival as resurrection in Saint Tychon. Also partly in the physicians of Saints Cosma and Damon, who graciously condescended to accept the membra viriliae in wax at their festival. St. Phallus of old memories emerges again to be worshipped in country chapels, to say nothing of the rest of paganism. There are those who have not yet learned to recognize sexuality as a function equivalent to hunger, and who therefore consider it as disgraceful that certain taboo institutions which were considered as asexual refuges are now recognized as overflowing with sexual symbolism. Those people are doomed to the painful realization that such is still the case in spite of their great revolt. One must learn to understand that, opposed to the customary habit of thought, psychoanalytic thinking reduces and resolves those symbolic structures which have become more and more complicated through countless elaborations. This means a course of redaction would be an intellectual enjoyment if the object were different. But here it becomes distressing not only aesthetically, but apparently also ethically, because the repressions which are to be overcome have been brought about by our best intentions. We must commence to overcome our virtuousness with a certain fear of falling into baseness on the other side. This is certainly true, for virtuousness is always inwardly compensated by a great tendency towards baseness. And how many profligates are there who inwardly preserve a mawkish virtue and moral megalomania? Both categories of people turn out to be snobs when they come in contact with analytic psychology, because the moral person has imagined an objective and cheap verdict on sexuality, and the unmoral person is entirely unaware of the vulgarity of their sexuality or of their incapacity for the unselfish love. One completely forgets that one can most miserably be carried away, not only by vice, but also by a virtue. This is a fantastic, orgiastic self-righteousness which is just as base, and which entails just as much injustice and violence as a vice. At this time, when a large part of people are beginning to discard Christianity, it is worthwhile to understand clearly why it was originally accepted. It was accepted in order to escape at last from the brutality of antiquity. As soon as we discard it, licentiousness returns, as impressively exemplified by life in our large modern cities. This step is not a forward step, but a backward one. It is as with individuals who have laid aside one form of transference and have no new one. Without fail they will occupy regressively to the old path of transference, to their great detriment, because the world around them has since then especially changed. The person who is repelled by the historical and philosophical weakness of the Christian dogmatism and the religious emptiness of a historical Jesus, of the person whose person we know nothing, and whose religious value is partly Talmudic, partly Hellenic wisdom, and discards Christianity and therewith Christian morality, is certainly confronted with the ancient problem of licentiousness. Today the individual still feels themselves restrained by the public hypocritical opinion, and therefore prefers to lead a secret, separate life, but publicly to represent morality. It might be different if people in general all at once found the moral mask too dull, and if they realized how dangerous their beasts lie in wait for each other, and then truly a frenzy of dream moralization might sweep over humanity. This is the dream, the wish dream, of the morally limited people of today. They forget necessity, which strangles people and robs them of their breath, and which, with a stern hand, interrupts every passion. It must not be imputed to me that I am wishing to refer the libido back by an analytic reduction to the primitive, almost conquered stages, entirely forgetting the fearful misery this would entail for humanity. Indeed, some individuals would let themselves be transported by the old-time frenzy of sexuality, from which the burden of guilt has been removed to their own greatest detriment. But these are the ones who under other circumstances would have prematurely perished in some other way. However, I will know the most effectual and most inexorable regulator of human sexuality. I well know the most effectual and most inexorable regulator of human sexuality. This is necessary. With this leaden weight, human lust will never fly too high. Today there are countless neurotics who are so simply because they do not know how to seek happiness in their own inner matter. They do not even realize where the lack lies. And besides these neurotics, there are many more normal people, and precisely people of the higher type, who feel restricted and disconnected. For all these reduction to the sexual elements should be undertaken, in order that they may be reinstated into the possession of their primitive self, and thereby learn to know and value its relation to the entire personality. In this way alone can certain requirements be fulfilled and others be repudiated as unfit because of their infantile character. In this way the individual will come to realize that certain things are to be sacrificed, although they are accomplished, but in another sphere. We imagine that we have long renounced, sacrificed, and cut off our incest wish, and that nothing of it is left. But it does not occur to us that this is not true, but that we unconsciously commit incest in another territory. In religious symbols, for example, we come across incest. Footnote. Or in the compensating organizations which appear in the place of religion. End of footnote. We consider the incestuous wish vanished and lost, and then rediscover it in full force in religion. This process of transformation has taken place unconsciously in secular development. Just as in Part 1 it is shown that a similar unconscious transformation of the libido is an ethically worthless pose, and with which I compared the Christianity of early Roman antiquity, where evidently licentiousness and brutality were strongly resisted. So here I must remark in regard to the sublimation of the incestuous libido, that the belief in the religious symbol has ceased to be an ethical idea, but it is an unconscious transformation of the incest wish into symbolic acts and symbolic concepts which cheat people, as it were, so that heaven appears to them as a father, and earth as a mother, and the people upon it as children and brothers and sisters. Thus people can remain a child for all time and satisfy their incest wish all unawares. This state would doubtless be ideal. Footnote. The condition was undoubtedly ideal for early times, where humans were more infantile in general, and it is still ideal for that part of humanity which is infantile. How large is that part? End of footnote. So, this state would doubtless be ideal if it were not infantile and therefore merely a one-sided wish which maintains a childish attitude. The reverse is anxiety. Much is said of pious people who remain unshaken in their trust of God and wander unswervingly, safe and blessed through the world. I have never seen this chilled her yet. It is probably a wish figure. The rule is great uncertainty among believers, and they drown with fanatical cries among themselves or among others. Moreover, they have their religious doubts, moral uncertainty, doubts of their own personality, feelings of guilt, and deepest of all, great fear of the opposite aspect of reality, against which the most highly intelligent people struggle with all their force. This other side is the devil, the adversary, or, expressed in modern terms, the corrective of reality, of the infantile world picture, which has been made acceptable through the predominating pleasure principle. But the world is not a garden of God, of the Father, but a place of terrors. Not only is heaven no father, and earth no mother, and the people not brothers and sisters, but they represent hostile, destroying powers, to which we are abandoned, the more surely, the more childishly and thoughtlessly we have entrusted ourselves to the so-called fatherly hand of God. One should never forget the harsh speech of the first Napoleon. The good God is always on the side of the heaviest artillery. The religious myth meets us here as one of the greatest and most significant human institutions, which, despite misleading symbols, nevertheless gives people assurance and strength, so that they may not be overwhelmed by the monsters of the universe. The symbol, considered from the standpoint of actual truth, is misleading, indeed, but it is psychologically true, because it was and is the bridge to the greatest achievements of humanity. Footnote on psychologically true. Here it is not to be forgotten we are moving entirely in the territory of psychology, which in no way is allied to transcendentalism, either in positive or negative relation. It is a question here of related fulfillment of the standpoint of the theory of cognition established by Kant, not merely for the theory, but, which is more important, for the practice. One should avoid playing with the infantile image of the world, because all this tends only to separate people from their essential and highest ethical goal, moral autonomy, not authority. The religious symbol should be retained after the inevitable obliteration of certain antiquated fragments, as postulates or as transcendent theory, and also as taught in precepts, but it is to be fulfilled with new meaning according to the demand of the culture of the present day. But this theory must not become, for the adult, a positive creed, an illusion which causes reality to appear to them in a false light. Just as a person is a dual being, having an intellectual and an animal nature, so does a person appear to need two forms of reality: the reality of culture, that is a symbolic transcendent theory, and the reality of nature, which corresponds to our conception of the true reality. In the same measure that the true reality is merely a figurative interpretation of the appreciation of reality, the religious symbolic theory is merely a figurative interpretation of certain endo-psychic apperceptions. But one very essential difference is that a transcendental support, independent in duration and condition, is assured to the trans-subjective reality through the best conceivable guarantees, while for the psychologic phenomena a transcendental support of subjective limitation and weakness must be recognized as a result of compelling empirical data. Therefore, true reality is one that is relatively universally valid. The psychologic reality, on the contrary, is merely a functional phenomena contained in the epoch of human civilization. Thus does it appear today from the best informed empirical standpoint. If, however, the psychologic were divested of its character of a biologic epiphenomenon in a manner neither known nor explained to me, and therefore was given the place of a physical entity, then the psychologic reality would be resolved into the true reality, or much more, it would be reversed, because the psychologic would lay claim to a greater worth for the ultimate theory because of its directness. So, end of footnote to the sentence, which I'll say it again. The symbol, considered from the standpoint of actual truth, is misleading. Indeed, but it is psychologically true, and there's that footnote we read, because it was and is the bridge to all the greatest achievements of humanity. But this does not mean to say that this unconscious way of transformation of the incest wish into religious exercise is the only one or the only possible one. There is also a conscious recognition and understanding with which we can take possession of this libido, which is bound up in incest and transformed into religious experience, so that we no longer need the stage of religious symbolism for this end. It is thinkable that instead of doing good to our fellow men for the love of Christ, we do it from the knowledge that humanity, even as ourselves, could not exist if, among the herd, the one could not sacrifice himself for the other. This would be the course of moral autonomy, the perfect freedom, when a person could, without compulsion, wish that they must do, and this from knowledge, without delusion through belief in the religious symbols. It is a positive creed which keeps us infantile, and therefore ethically inferior. Although of the greatest significance from the cultural point of view, and of imperishable beauty from the aesthetic standpoint, this delusion can no longer ethically suffice humanity striving after moral autonomy. The infantile and moral danger lies in belief in the symbol, because through that we guide the libido to an imaginary reality. The simple negation of the symbol changes nothing, for the entire mental disposition remains the same. We merely remove the dangerous object. But the object is not dangerous. The danger is our own infantile mental state, for love of which we have lost something very beautiful and ingenious through that simple abandonment of the religious symbol. I think belief should be replaced by an understanding. Then we would keep the beauty of the symbol, but still remain free from the depressing results of submission to belief. This would be the psychoanalytic cure for belief and disbelief. Reader's footnote. This is something similar to what Joseph Campbell says about keep your images transparent to the transcendent. End of reader's comment. The vision following upon that of the city is that of a, quote, strange fir tree with gnarled branches, unquote. This vision does not seem extraordinary to us after all, that we have learned of the tree of life and its associations with the city and the waters of life. This especial tree seems simply to continue the category of the mother symbols. The attribute strange probably signifies, as in dreams, a special emphasis, that is, a strange underlying complex material. Unfortunately, the author gives us no individual material for this. As the tree already suggested in the symbolism of the city is particularly emphasized through the further development of Miss Miller's visions here, I find it necessary to discuss at some length the history of the symbolism of the tree. It is well known that trees have played a large part in the cult myth from the remotest times. The typical myth tree is the tree of the paradise, or of life, which we discover abundantly used in Babylonian and also in Jewish lore, and in pre-Christian times, the pine tree of Attis, the tree or trees of Mithra, in Germanic mythology, Yggdrasil, and so on. The hanging of the Attis image on the pine tree, the hanging of Marsyas, which became a celebrated artistic motive, the hanging of Odin, the Germanic hanging sacrifices, indeed the whole series of hanged gods, teaches us that the hanging of Christ on the cross is not a unique occurrence in religious mythology, but belongs to the same circle of ideas as others. In this world of imagery, the cross of Christ is the tree of life, and equally the wood of death. This contrast is not astonishing. Just as the origin of people from trees was a legendary idea, so there were also burial customs, in which people were buried in hollow trees. From that, the German language retains even now, the expression Totenbaum, tree of death, for a coffin. Keeping in mind the fact that the tree is predominantly a mother symbol, then the mystic significance of this manner of burial can be in no way incomprehensible to us. The dead are delivered back to the mother for rebirth. We encounter the symbol in the Osiris myth handed down by Plutarch, which is, in general, typical in various aspects. Rhea is pregnant with Osiris, at the same time also with Isis. Osiris and Isis mate even in the mother's womb, motive of the night journey on the sea of incest. Their son is Arurus, later called Horus. It is said of Isis that she was born in absolute humility. Te tau ti de ton ision en panugrios genesthia. Translated, in the fourth place, Iris was born in absolute humility. It is said of Osiris that a certain Palmes in Thebes heard a voice from the temple of Zeus while drawing water, which commanded him to proclaim that Osiris was born Megas Basileus Euergetis Osiris, translated, the greatest beneficent king Osiris. In honor of this, the Pygmalion were celebrated. They were similar to the Phalophorion. The Pamelion were celebrated. They were celebrated to the Phalophorion. Pamelius is a phallic demon, similar to the original Dionysus. The myth reduced reads: Osiris and Isis were generated by Phallus from the water mother womb in the ordinary manner. Cronus had made Rhea pregnant. The relation was secret, and Rhea was his sister. Helios, however, observed it and cursed the relation. Osiris was killed in a crafty manner by the god of the underworld, Typhon, who locked him in a chest. He was thrown into the Nile and so carried out to sea. Osiris, however, mated in the underworld with his second sister, Nephthys, motive of the night journey to the sea of incest. One sees here how the symbolism is developed. In the mother womb, before the outward existence, Osiris commits incest. In death, in second intrauterine existence, Osiris again commits incest, both times with a sister who is simply substituted for the mother as a legal, uncensored symbol, since the marriage with the sister in early antiquity was not merely tolerated, but really commended. Zarathustra also recommended to the marriage of kindred. This form of myth would be impossible today because cohabitation with a sister, being incestuous, would be repressed. The wicked Typhon entices Osiris craftily into a box or chest. This distortion of the true state of affairs is transparent. The original sin caused people to wish to go back to the mother again, that is, the incestuous desire for the mother, condemned by law, is the ruse supposedly invented by Typhon. The fact is, the ruse is very significant. Man tries to sneak into rebirth through subterfuge in order to become a child again. An early Egyptian hymn even raises an accusation against the mother Isis because she destroys the sun god Re by treachery. It was interpreted as the ill will of the mother towards her son that she banished and betrayed him. The hymn describes how Isis fashioned a snake, put it on the path of Re, and how the snake wounded the sun god with a poisonous bite from which he would never recover, so that finally he had to retire on the back of the heavenly cow. But this cow is the cow-headed goddess, just as Osiris is the bull Apis. The mother is accused as if she were the cause of man flying to the mother in order to be cured of the wound which she herself inflicted. This wound is the prohibition of incest. Footnote, Here I must again recall that I give the word incest more significance than properly belongs to the term. Just as the libido is the onward driving force, so incest is in some manner the backward urge into childhood. For the child, it cannot be spoken of as incest. Only for the adult who possesses a completely formed sexuality does the backward urge become incest, because that person is no longer a child, but possesses a sexuality which cannot be permitted a regressive application. End of footnote. Man is thus cut off from the hopeful certainty of childhood and early youth, from all the unconscious instinctive happenings which permit the child to live as an appendage to his parents, unconscious of himself. There must be contained in this many sensitive memories of the animal age, where there was not any thou shalt and thou shalt not, but all was just simple occurrence. Even yet a deep animosity seems to live in people because a brutal law has separated them from the instinctive yielding of their desires and from the great beauty of the harmony of the animal nature. This separation manifested itself, among other things, in the incest prohibition and its correlates, laws of marriage, etc. Therefore, pain and anger relate to the mother, as if she were responsible for the domestication of the sons of men. In order not to become conscious of his incest wish, his backward hearkening to the animal nature, the son throws all the burden of the guilt on his mother, from which arises the ideal of the terrible mother. The mother becomes for him a scepter of anxiety, a nightmare. Footnote. Compare the nightmare legend in which the mare is a beautiful woman. End of footnote. After the completed night journey to the sea, the chest of Osiris is cast ashore by Byblos and lay in the branch of an erica, which grew around the coffin and became a splendid tree. The king of the land had the tree planted as a column under his roof. Footnote. This recalls the phallic columns placed in the temples of Asarte. In fact, according to one version, the wife of the king was named Asarte. This symbol brings to mind the crosses fittingly called Ixolpia, pregnant crosses, which conceal a secret reliquary. End of footnote. During this period of Osiris' absence, the winter solace, the lament customarily during thousands of years for the dead god and his return occurs, and its eurysis is a feast of joy. A passage from the mournful quest of Isis is especially noteworthy. Quote, she flutters like a swallow lamenting around the column, which encloses the god sleeping in death. End of quote. The same motive returns in the Kyffhauser saga. Later on, Typhon dismembers the corpse and scatters the pieces. We come across the motive of dismemberment in countless sun myths. Footnote. Spielreim points out numerous indications of the motif of dismemberment in a demented patient. Fragments of the most varied things and materials were cooked or burnt. The ash can become man. The patient saw children dismembered in glass coffins. In addition, the above-mentioned washing, cleaning, cooking, and burning has, besides the coitus motive, also the pregnancy motive, the latter predominantly in a predominating measure. End of footnote. So we came upon the motive of dismemberment in countless sun myths, namely the inversion of the idea of the comparison of the child, of the composition of the child in the mother's womb. Footnote. Later offshoots of this primitive theory of the origin of children are contained in the doctrine of karma and the conception of the Mendelian theory of hereditary. One only has to realize that all apperceptions are subjectively conditioned. So, end of footnote. In fact, the mother Isis collects the pieces of the body with the help of the jackal-headed Anubis. She finds the corpse with the help of dogs. Here, the nocturnal devourers of bodies, the dogs and jackals, become the assistants of the composition of the reproduction. Footnote. Demeter assembled the limbs of the dismembered Dionysus, and from them produced the god Anu. End of footnote. The Egyptian vulture owes its symbolic meaning as mother to this necrophilic habit. In Persian antiquity, the corpses were thrown out for the dogs to devour, just as today the Indian funeral pyres, the removal of the carcasses is left to the vultures. Persia was familiar with the custom of leading a dog to the bed of one dying, whereupon the latter had to present the dog with a morsel. Compare Diodorus 362. The custom on its surface evidently signifies that the morsel is to belong to the dog so that he will spare the body of the dead, precisely as Cerberus was soothed by the honey cakes which Hercules gave him in his journey to hell. But when we bear in mind the jackal-headed Anubis, who rendered his good services in the gathering together of the dismembered Osiris, and the mother significance of the vulture, then the question arises whether something deeper was not meant by this ceremony. Kreutzer has also concerned himself with this idea and has come to the conclusion that the astral forms of the dog ceremonies, that is, the appearance of Sirius, the dog star, at the periods of the sun's highest position, is related to this in that the introduction of a dog has a compensatory significance, death being thereby made reversibly equal to the sun's highest position. This is quite in conformity with the psychologic thought, which results from the very general fact that death is interpreted as entrance into the mother's womb, or rebirth. This interpretation would seem to be supported by other enigmatic functions of the dog and the sacrificium Mithracum. In the moments, a dog always leaps up upon the bull killed by Mithra. In the monuments, a dog always leaps upon the bull killed by Mithra. However, the sacrifice is probably to be interpreted through the Persian legend, as well as through the monument, as a moment of the highest fecundity. The most beautiful expression of this can be seen in the magnificent Mithra relief of Hedernheim. Upon one large side of a large stone slab, probably formerly rotating, is seen the stereotyped overthrowing and sacrifice of the bull. But upon the other side stands Saul, with a bunch of grapes in his hand, Mithra with a cornucopia, and Dadophrys with fruits, corresponding to the legend that all fecundity proceeds from the dead bull of the world, fruits from the horns, wines from its blood, grain from the tail, cattle from its sperma, leek from its nose, and so on. Sylvanus stands above this scene with the animals of the forest arising from him. The significance suspected by a Kreutzer might very easily belong to the dog in this connection. A footnote. Yet to be added is the fact that the Kynosyphlak Anubis, as the restorer of the corpse of Osiris, also genius of the dog star, had a compensatory significance. In this significance, he appears upon many sarcophagi. The dog is also a regular companion of the healing Asclepius. The following quotation from Petronius best supports the Kreutzer hypothesis. Quote, Valde te rogo ut secundum pedis statua mae captellum pingas, ut mihi continguat tua beneficio post mortem vivere. Translated, I beseech you instantly to fasten beside the feet of my statue a dog, so that because of your beneficence I may attain to life after death. Moreover, the relation of the dog to the dog-headed Hecate, the goddess of the underworld, hints at its being the symbol of rebirth. She received as canicula, a superficial dog to keep away the pest. Her close relation to Artemis as goddess of the moon permits her opposition to fertility to be glimpsed. Hecate is also the first to bring to Demeter the news of her stolen child, the role of Anubis. Also, the goddess of birth, Ilithia, receives sacrifices of dogs, and Hecate herself is, on occasion, goddess of marriage and birth. So, end of footnote. Now let us turn back to the myth of Osiris. In spite of the restoration of the corpse accomplished by Isis, the resuscitation succeeds only incompletely insofar as the phallus of Osiris cannot again be produced, because it was eaten by the fishes. The power of life was wanting. 54. A footnote. Frobenius observes that frequently the gods of fire, sun heroes, lack a member. He gives the following parallel. Quote, just as the god wrenches out an arm from the ogre or giant, so does Odysseus pluck out the eyes of the noble Polyphemus, whereupon the sun creeps up mysteriously into the sky. Might the fire-making, twisting, and wrenching out of the arm be connected? The question is why this clearly eliminated if we assume, corresponding to the train of thought and to the ancients, that the wrenching out of the arm is really a castration, the symbol of the robbery of the force of life. It is an act corresponding to the Attis castration because of the mother. From this renunciation, which is really a symbolic mother, incest, arises the discovery of fire, as previously we have already suspected. Moreover, mention must be made of the fact that to wrench out an arm means first of all overpowering, and so on that account can happen to the hero as well as to his opponent. End of footnote. Osiris as a phantom once more impregnated Isis, but the fruit is Harpocrates, who was feeble in tois kautothen guiois in the lower limbs, that is, corresponding to the significance of guion at the feet. Here it is plainly evident foot is used in the phallic meaning. This incurability of the setting sun corresponds to the incurability of Re in the above-mentioned older Egyptian sun myth. Osiris, although only a phantom, now prepares the young son, S-U-N, his son, S-O-N, Horus, for the battle with Typhon, the evil spirit of darkness. Osiris and Horus correspond to the father-son symbolism mentioned in the beginning, which symbolic figure corresponds again to the above formulation. Compare especially the description of the Cup of Thebes. So the above formulation is flanked by the well-formed and ugly figure of Horus and Harpocrates, the latter appearing mostly as a cripple, often represented distorted as a mere caricature. Footnote. Professor Ford has expressed in a personal discussion the idea that a further determinate for the motive of the dissimilar brothers is to be found in the elementary observation towards birth and afterbirth. It is an exotic custom to treat the placenta as a child. So there's an illustration here of a bull Mithric sacrifice creating fruit from this. So a bull with four figures above, and they're all holding symbolism, and then above those figures in arc are more figures, and the bull has got his head down on the ground and has apparently been sacrificed. All right, so we continue. So he, and we're talking here about Osiris, I think, he is confused in the tradition very much with Horus, with whom he also has the name in common. Horpichud as his real name, footnote, Brug's Religion and Mythology der Altem Egypter, so reads, is composed from trud, child, and hor from the adjective hri, up, on top, and signifies the upcoming child as the rising sun, and opposite to Osiris, who personifies the setting sun, the sun of the west. Thus Osiris and Horpichud or Horus are one being, both husband and son of the same mother. Hathor Isis, the Chunam Ra, the sun god of Lower Egypt, represented as a ram, has at his side, as the female divinity of the lad, Hat Mehit, who wears the fish on her head. She is the mother and wife of Bineb-Did Ram, the local name of Chunam Ra, and the symbol of Hibis. Awan Ra was invoked. And footnote to Chibis, so the same thing as the last footnote is a reference. So, Amun Ra was evoked. Quote, Thy, Cham Ram, dwells in Mendes, united as the quadruple god Thumius. He is the phallus, the lord of the gods. The bull of his mother rejoices in the cow, Ahet the mother, and the man fructifies through his semen. End of quote. In further inscriptions, Hat Mehit was directly referred to as the mother of Mendes. Mendes is the Greek form of Bi-Neb-Did Ram. She is also invoked as the good, with an additional significance of Ta Nofret, or young woman. The cow, as a symbol of the mother, is found in all possible forms and variation of Hathor Isis, and comes in the female nun, parallel to this, that is the primitive goddess Nit or Naith, the protoplasm which related to the Hindu Atman. Footnote, in the conception of Atman there is a certain fluid quality insofar as he really can be identified with Purushna of the Rigveda. Purushna covers all the places of the earth, flowering about it 10 fingers high. End of footnote. So, Atman is equally of masculine and feminine nature. None is, therefore, invoked as Amon, the original water. Footnote. In Thebes, where the chief god is Shudnum, the latter represents the breath of the wind in his cosmic component, from which later on the spirit of God floating over the waters has developed. The primitive idea of the cosmic parents who lie pressed together until the sun separates them, compared to the symbolism of Atman above. So, end of footnote. So, we'll start at the beginning of the sentence. None is therefore invoked as Aman, the original water, and we have that footnote, which is in the beginning. He is also designated as the father of fathers, the mother of mothers. To this corresponds the invocation of the female side of Nun Aman, or Nit, or Neth. Quote, Nit, the ancient, the mother of God, the mistress of Esne, the father of fathers, the mother of mothers, who is the beetle and the vulture and the beginning in its beginnings. Nit, the ancient, the mother who bore the light god Ra, who bore first of all when there was nothing which brought forth. The cow, the ancient, which bore the sun and then laid the germ of gods and men. End of quote. The word Nun has the significance of young, new, fresh, also the oncoming waters of the Nile flood. In a transferred sense, Nun was also used for the chaotic primitive waters, in general for the primitive generative matter, which was personified by the goddess Nunit. From her nut sprang the goddess of heaven, who was represented with a starry body, but also with a heavenly cow with a starry body. When the sun god little by little retires on the back of the heavenly cow, just as poor Lazarus returns into Abraham's bosom, each has the same significance. They return into the mother in order to rise as Horus. Thus it can be said that in the morning the goddess is the mother, at noon the sister wife, and in the evening again the mother, who receives the dying in her lap, reminding us of the Pietà of Michelangelo. As shown by the illustration from Diderot's iconography chrétienne, this thought has been transferred as a whole unto Christianity. Thus the fate of Osiris is explained. He passes into the mother's womb, the chest, the sea, the tree, the column of Astartes. He is dismembered, reformed, and reappears again in his son, Horpichurd. Upon entering into the further mysteries which the beautiful myth reveals to us, there is still much to be said about the symbol of the tree. Osiris lies in the branches of the tree, surrounded by them, as in the mother's womb. The motive of embracing and entwining is often found in the sun myths, meaning that in the myth it is in the myth of rebirth. A good example is the Sleeping Beauty, who also the legend of a girl who is enclosed between the bark and the tree, but who is freed by a youth with his horn. This horn is of gold and silver, which hints at the sunbeam of a phallic meaning. Compare the previous legends of the horn. An exotic legend tells of the sun hero, how he must be freed from the plant entwining around him, from Frobenius. A girl dreams of her lover who has fallen into the water. She tries to save him, but first has to pull seaweed and seagrass from the water. Then she catches him. In an African myth, the hero, after his act, must first be disentangled from the seaweed. In a Polynesian myth, the hero's ship has been encoiled by the tentacles of a giant polyp. Ray's ship is encoiled by a night serpent on its night journey on the sea. In a poetic rendering of the history of the Buddha's birth by Sir Edwin Arnold, The Light of Asia, the motive of an embrace is also found. Quote, Queen Maya stood at noon, her days fulfilled, under a palso in the palace grounds, a stately trunk straight as a temple shaft, with crown of glossy leaves and fragrant blooms. And knowing the time comes for all things new, the conscious tree bent down its bough to make a bower above Queen Maya's majesty. The earth put forth 1,000 sudden flowers to spread a couch While ready for the bath, the rock hard gave out a limpid stream of crystal flow. So she brought forth the child. End of quote. We come across a very similar motive in the cult legend of the Samian Hera. Yearly it was claimed that the image that disappeared from the temple was fastened somewhere on the seashore on a trunk of the Logos tree and wound about with its branches. There it was quote-unquote found and was treated with wedding cake. The feast is undoubtedly a Airos Gamos ritual marriage, because in Samos there was a legend that Zeus had first had a long-continued secret love relation with Hera. In Plataea and Argos, the marriage procession was represented with bridesmaids, marriage feasts, and so on. The festival took place in the wedding month Gamilion, beginning of February. But in Plataea, the image was previously carried into a lonely place in the wood, approximately corresponding to the legend of Plutarch that Zeus had kidnapped Hera and then had hidden her in the cave of Cytherion. According to our deductions previously made, we must conclude from this that there is still another train of thought, namely the magic charm of rejuvenation, which is condensed in the Hierogamos. The disappearance and hiding in the wood, in the cave, on the seashore, entwined in a willow tree, points to the death of the sun and rebirth. The early springtime Gamilion, the time of marriage in February, fits in with that very well. In fact, Pausanias informs us that the Argavian Hera became a maiden again by a yearly bath in the spring of Cathanos. The significance of the bath is emphasized by the information that in the Plataean cult of Hera Thalii, Tritonian nymphs appeared as water carriers. In a tale from the Iliad, where the conjugal couch of Zeus upon Mount Ida is discovered, it is said, and here footnote to what it is said, most singularly even in the quotation v. 288, the description is found in sleep sitting high on a pine tree. This description is found of sleep, sitting high up on a pine tree. Quote, there he sat surrounded by branches covered with thorny leaves, like the singing bird, who by night flutters through the mountains. Unquote. It appears as if the motive belongs to the Hierogamos. Compare also with the magic net with which Hephaestus enfolds Ares and Aphrodite in flagranti, and kept them for the sport of the gods. End of footnote. So it is said, quote, the son of Saturn spake and took his wife into his arms, while underneath the pair the sacred earth threw up her freshest herbs, the dewy lotus, the crocus flower, the thick and soft hyacinth. All these upbore them from the ground, upon this couch they lay, while o'er them a bright golden cloud gathered and shed its drops of glistening dew. So slumbered on the heights of Gargaros, the All-Father overcame by sleep and love, and held his consort in his arms. Translated by W.C. Bryant. Dexter recognizes in this description an unmistakable allusion to the Garden of the Gods on the extreme western shore of the ocean, an idea which might have been taken from a pre-Homeric Hierogamos hymn. The western land is the land of the setting sun, where Heracles, Gilgamesh, etc., hastened with the sun in order to find their immortality, where the sun and the maternal sea unite in an externally rejuvenating intercourse. Our supposition of a condensation of the Hierogamos with the myth of rebirth is probably confirmed by this. Pausanias mentions a related myth fragment where the statue of Artemis Orthia is also called Lygodesma, chained with willows, because it was found in a willow tree. This tale seems to be related to the general Greek celebration of Hierogamos with the above-mentioned customs. Footnote. The rite of enchanting the statue of Heracles and the Tyrian Melkurth is related to this also. The Kabiri, too, were wrapped in coverings. End of footnote. The motive of the devouring, quote-unquote devouring, which Frobenius has shown to be a regular constituent of the sun myths, is closely related to this, also metaphorically. The quote-unquote whale dragon, or mother's womb, always devours the hero. This devouring may also be partial instead of complete. A 6-year-old girl who goes to school unwillingly dreams that her leg is encircled by a large red worm. She had a tender interest for this creature, contrary to what might be expected. An adult patient who cannot separate from an older friend on account of an extraordinarily strong mother transference dreams that, quote, she had to get across some deep water, typical idea, with this friend. Her friend fell in, mother transference, and she tries to drag her out and almost succeeds, but a large crab seizes on the dreamer by the foot and tries to pull her in, unquote. Etymology also confirms this conception. There is an Indo-Germanic root, vilu, val, with the meaning of encircling, surrounding, turning. From this is derived Sanskrit val, valati, equals to cover, to surround, to encircle, to encoil, symbol of the snake. Vali equals creeping plant. Uluta equals boa constrictor, equals Latin volutus, Lithuanian velu, velti, equals wilkelen, to roll up. Church Slavonian vlina equals Old High German. Wella equals welly, or wave or bellow. To the root welu also belongs the root vlo, with the meaning cover, corium, or womb. The serpent, on account of its casting its skin, is an excellent symbol of rebirth. Sanskrit ulva has the same meaning. Latin vulva, vulva, vula, vulva. To velu also belongs the root ulvora, with the meaning of fruitful field, covering or husk of plants and plants sheath. Sanskrit urvara, sown field. Zend urvara, plant. See the personification of the plowed furrow. The same root vel has also the meaning of wallen, to undulate. Sanskrit ulmuka, conflagration. Thalia, thala, Gothic vulam, walam, to undulate. Old High German and Middle High German walm, heat and glow. It is typical that in the state of involation, the hair of the sun hero always falls out from the heat. Further, the root vel is found with the meaning to sound and to will, to wish, or libido. Footnote, compare with the resounding sun. End footnote. The motive of encoiling is mother symbolism. Footnote, the motive of the striking rocks belongs also to the motive of devouring, Frobenius. The hero in his ship must pass between two rocks which strike together, similar to the biting door to the tree trunk that snaps together. In the passage, generally the tail of a bird is pinched off, or the poop of the ship, etc. The castration motive is once more clearly related here, for the castration takes the place of the mother incest. The castration is a substitution for coitus. Scheffel employs this idea in his well-known poem, quote, a herring loved an oyster, etc. The poem ends with the oyster biting off the herring's head for a kiss. The doves, which bring Zeus ambrosia, also have to pass through the rocks which strike together. The doves bring the food of immortality to Zeus by means of incest, entrance into the mother, very similar to Freya's apples' breasts. Frobenius also mentions the rock or caves which open only at a magic word and are very closely connected with the rocks which strike together. Most eliminating in this respect is a South African myth. Quote, one must call the rock by name and cry loudly, "Rock utud jambili, open so that I may enter." But the rock answers when it will not. But the rock answers when it will not open to the call. The rock will not open to children; it will open to the swallow which can fly in the air. The remarkable thing is that no human power can open the rock, only a formula has the power, or a bird. The wording merely says that the opening of the rock is an undertaking which cannot be really accomplished, but which one must wish to accomplish. In Middle High German, to wish is really, quote, to have the power to create something extraordinary, unquote. When a man dies, then only the wish that he might live remains, an unfulfilled wish, a fluttering wish. Wherefore, souls are birds. The soul is wholly only libido, as is illustrated in many parts of this work. It is to wish. Thus, the helpful bird, who assists the hero in the whale to come again into the light, who opens the rock, is the wish for rebirth. For the bird as a wish, see the beautiful painting by Thoma, where the youth longingly stretches out his arms to the birds who pass over his head. And a footnote. So we were at the sentence that said, the motive of uncoiling is mother's symbolism, and then we had that footnote. Go on. This is verified by the fact that the trees, for example, bring forth again, like the whale in the legend of Jonah. They do that very generally. Thus, in the Greek legend of Melai Numphai means million virgins, of the ash tree, are the mothers of the race of men of the Iron Age. In the northern mythology, Askr, the ash tree, is the primitive father. His wife, Embla, is the Emsij, the active one, and not, as was earlier believed, the aspen. Askr probably means, in the first place, the phallic sphere of the ash tree. Compare the Sabine custom of parting the bride's hair with the lace. The Bundehesh symbolizes the first people, Meschia and Meschiani, and the tree Raivas, one part of which places a branch in a hole of the other part. The material, which, according to the northern myths, was animated by the god when he created men, is designated tre, equals wood, or tree. Footnote. In Athens there was a family of Agaipotomai hewn from poplars. We call also uli equals wood, which in Latin is called materia. In the wood of the quote-unquote world ash, Yggdrasil, a human pair, hid themselves at the end of the world, from whom sprang the race of the renowned world. The Noah motive is easily recognized in this conception, the night journey on the sea. At the same time is the symbol of Yggdrasil. A mother idea is again apparent. At the moment of the destruction of the world ash becomes the guardian mother, the tree of death and life, one Aixolopion. That means pregnant, and there's a footnote to this. Javanese tribes commonly set up their image of God in an artificial cavity of a tree. This fits with the little hole fantasy of Zinzendorf and his sect. In the Persian myth, the white hoama is a divine tree growing in the lake of Vorushkasha. The fish Kar Mahi circles protectingly around it and defends it against the toad Ahriman. It gives eternal life, children to women, husbands to girls, and horses to men. In the Minokhired, the tree is called the preparer of the corpse. End of footnote. The function of rebirth of the world ash also helps to elucidate the representation met with in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is called, quote, the gate of the knowledge of the soul of the East. We have a quote. I am the pilot in the holy keel. I am the steersman who allows no rest in the ship of Ra. Footnote. Ship of the sun, which accompanies the sun and the soul over the sea of death to the rising. End of footnote. I know that tree of emerald green, from whose midst Ra rises to the height of the clouds. End of quote. Ship and tree of the dead, death ship and death tree, are here closely connected. The conception is of Ra, born from the tree, ascends Osiris in the Erika. The representation of the sun god Mithra is probably explained in the same way. He is represented upon the head Dirrium relief, with half his body arising from the top of a tree. In the same way, numerous other monuments show Mithra half embodied in the rock to illustrate a rock birth similar to men. Frequently, there is a stream near the birthplace of Mithra. This conflagration of symbols is found in the birth of Ascanes, the first Saxon king, who grew from the Hertz rocks, which are in the midst of the wood. Footnote. Similarly, Isaiah, quote, "Look unto the rock whence ye are hewn, and to the hole of the pit whence ye are digged." Further proof is found in A. von Lois A. Manher, and it says his book. End of footnote. Here we find in the midst of the wood and near the fountain. So for footnote for the fountain, Grimm mythology. Near the fountain, here we find all the mother symbols united: earth, wood, water, three forms of tangible matter. We can wonder no longer that in the Middle Ages the tree was poetically addressed with the title of the honor mistress. Likewise, it is not astounding that the Christian legend transformed the tree of death, the cross, into the tree of life, so that Christ was often represented on a living and fruit-bearing tree. This reversion of the cross symbol to the tree of life, which even in Babylon was an important and authentic religious symbol, is also considered entirely probable by Zöckler, an authority on the history of the cross. The pre-Christian meaning of the symbol does not contradict this interpretation. On the contrary, its meaning is life. The appearance of the cross in the sun worship, with the cross, the cross with equal arms, and the swastika cross as representative of the sun's rays, as well as the cult of the goddess of Aloud, Iris, in the crux, and Sata, the rope, the spectrum, Veneris, female, love, etc., in no way contradicts the previous historical meaning. The Christian legend has made abundant use of this symbolism. So there's a picture here of Christ on a tree, and the tree has flowers and leaves, viney, all over it, and it's a sort of medieval, iconic picture with the priests and their halos of gold and etc. around him. So we go on. The student of medieval history is familiar with the representation of the cross growing above the grave of Adam. The legend was that Adam was buried at Golgotha. Seth had planted on his grave a branch of the paradise tree, which became the cross and the tree of death of Christ. Footnote. The legend of Seth is found in Juvenal, Mystère inédite de the 15th siècle, part 2, page 16. Quoted from Zöckler. End of it. We all know that through Adam's guilt, sin and death came into the world, and Christ, through his death, has redeemed us from the guilt. To the question in what had Adam's guilt consisted, it is said that the unpardonable sin to be expiated by death was that he dared to pick a fruit from the paradise tree. Footnote. The guilt is, as always, wherever possible, thrown upon the mother. The Germanic sacred trees are also under the law of an absolute taboo. No leaf may be taken from them, and nothing may be picked from the ground upon which their shadows fall. End of footnote. The results of this are described in an Oriental legend. One to whom it was permitted to cast one look into paradise after the fruit saw the tree there and the 4 streams, but the tree was withered, and its branches and in its branches lay an infant. The mother had become pregnant. Footnote. According to the German legend, Grimm, Volume 2, page 809, the redeeming hero will be born when the tree, which now grows as a weak shoot from the wall, has become large, and when from its wood the cradle can be made in which the hero can be rocked. The formula reads, quote, "A linden shall be planted, and there shall bear, which shall bear on high 2 boughs, from the wood of which a poi shall be made. The child who will be the first to lie therein is destined to be taken by the sword from life to death. and then salvation will enter in. In the Germanic legend, the appearance of a future event is connected most remarkably with a budding tree. Compare with this the designation of Christ as a branch or a rod. End of footnote. This remarkable legend corresponds to the Talmudic tradition that Adam, before Eve, already possessed a demon wife by name Lilith, with whom he quarreled for mastership, but Lilith raised herself into the air through the magic of the name of God and hid herself in the sea. Adam forced her back with the help of 3 angels. Footnote. Herein the motive of the helpful bird is apparent. Angels are really birds. Compare the bird clothing to the sounds of the underworld, soul birds. In the Sacrificium Mithrancium, the messenger of the god of the angels, a raven, the winged Hermes, etc. End of footnote. Lilith became a nightmare, a Lamia, who threatened those with child and who kidnapped the newborn child. The parallel myth is that of Lamias, the spectress of the night, who terrified the children. The original legend is that Lamia enticed Zeus, but the jealous Hera, however, caused Lamia to bring only dead children into the world. Since that time, the raging Lamia is a persecutor of children, whom she destroys whenever she can. This motive frequently recurs in fairy tales, where the mother often appears directly as a murderess or as a devourer of men. A German paradigm is the well-known tale of Hansel and Gretel. Lamia is actually a large, voracious fish, which establishes the connection from the whale-dragon myth so beautifully worked out by Frobenius, in which the sea monster devours the sun hero for rebirth, and where the hero must employ every stratagem to conquer the monster. Here again we meet with the idea of the terrible mother in the form of the voracious fish, the mouth of death. Footnote. In close connection between Delios equals dolphin and Delius equals uterus, the close connection is emphasized. In Delphi, there is a cavity in the earth, and the tripod Delphinis equals Delphic, a Delphic table, with 3 feet in the form of a dolphin. See in the last chapters of Melicertes upon the dolphin and the fiery sacrifice of Melkarth. Continuing, in Frobenius there are numerous examples where the monster has devoured not only men but also animals, plants, and entire country, all of which are redeemed by the hero to a glorious rebirth. The Lamias are typically nightmares, the feminine nature of which is abundantly proven. Their universal peculiarity is that they ride upon their victims. Their counterparts are the spectral horses which bear their riders along in a mad gallop. One recognizes very easily in these symbolic forms the types of anxious dreams, which, as Ricklin shows, have already become important for the interpretation of fairy tales through the investigation of Leistner. The typical writing takes on a special aspect through the result of an analytic investigation of infantile psychology. The 2 contributions of Freud and myself have emphasized, on the one side, the anxiety significance of the horse, on the other side, the sexual meaning of the fantasy of riding. When we take these experiences into consideration, we need no longer be surprised that the maternal wood ash, Yggdrasil, is called in German, quote, the frightful horse, end quote. Canny Geiter says of nightmares, quote, Abigunt eas nymphas mater deos maras, hodoi rustuci ose capitis, equini tectus injecto, cuju modi ossa perhastera in rusticorum vilis cribra est anima advencere, nocte autem ad concubea equitare credunter et ecrus fatigare ad longinqua aeterna. Translated. Even today, the country people drive off these nymphs, Mother Goddess Maria, by throwing a bone of the head of a horse upon the roof. Bones of this kind can often be seen throughout the land on the farmhouses of the country people. By night, however, they are believed to ride at the time of the first sleep, and they are believed to tire out their horses by long journeys. End of interpretation. The connection of nightmare and horse seems at first glance to be present also etymologically, nightmare and mare. The Indo-Germanic root for mare is mark. Mar is the horse, English mare. Old High German mahara, male horse, and mera, female horse. Old Norse mer, mara, nightmare. Anglo-Saxon mera. The French cauchemar comes from calcare, to tread, to step, of iterative meaning, therefore to trod, to press down. It was also said of the cock who stepped upon the hen. This movement is also typical for the nightmare. Therefore it is said of King Valandi, Mahar Tradhan, the Mahar trod on him in sleep even to death. A synonym for nightmare is the troll, or tretter. Footnote, compare with horses who tread, causing springs to float. Or treader, end of footnote. This movement, calcare, is proven again by the experience of Freud and myself with children, where a special infantile sexual significance is attached to stepping or kicking. The common Aryan root mar means to die, therefore mara, the dead or death. From this results moros equals fate, also moira. As is well known, the Nornies, sitting under the world ash, quote-unquote world ash, personify fate like Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. With the Celts, the conception of the fates probably passes into that of matres and matrone, which had a divine significance among the Germans. A well-known passage in Julius Caesar, De Bello Gallico, informs us of this meaning of the mother. Ut matres familiares eorum sortibus et vaticinationibus declarant utrum prolitium comiti et usu esset nec ne. Translation. That these matrons should declare by lots whether it would be to their advantage or not to engage in battle. Footnote to this. Parallel to the mantric significance of the Delphic chasm, Mimir's brook, etc., abyss of wisdom, see the last chapter, Hippolotos, with whom his stepmother was enamored, was placed after death with the wise nymph, Egeria. End of footnotes. In Slav, Mara means witch. Mora equals demon or nightmare. Mor or more, Swiss Germanic, means sow, also an insult. The Bohemian Mura means nightmare, and evening moth or sphinx. This strange connection is explained through analysis, where it often occurs that animals with movable shells, Venus shells, or wings are utilized for very transparent reasons as symbols of the female genitals. The Sphingina are the twilight moths. They, like the nightmare, come in the darkness. Finally, it is to be observed that the sacred olive tree of Athens is called Moria, which was derived from Moros. Hortios wished to cut down the tree, but killed himself with the axe in the attempt. The sound resemblance of mar, mere with mare equals sea, and Latin mare equals sea is remarkable, although etymologically accidental. Might it refer back to the quote, great primitive idea of the mother, unquote, who, in the first place, meant to us our individual world and afterwards became the symbol of all worlds? Goethe said of all mothers, quote, they are encircled by images of all creatures, unquote. The Christians, too, could not refrain from uniting their Mother of God with water. Ave Maris Stella is the beginning of the hymn to Mary. Then again, it is the horses of Neptune which symbolize the waves of the sea. It is probably of importance that the infantile word mama, mother's breast, is repeated in this initial sounds of all possible languages, and that the mothers of two religious heroes are called Mary and Maya, that the mother is the horse of the child to be seen most plainly in the primitive custom of carrying children on the back or letting it ride on the hip. Odin hung on to the world ash, and the mother, his horse of terror. The Egyptian sun god sits on the back of his mother, the heavenly cow. We have already seen that, according to Egyptian conceptions, Isis, the mother of God, played an evil trick on the sun god with a poisonous snake. Also, Isis behaved treacherously towards her son Horus in Plutarch's tradition. That is, Horus vanquished the evil Typhon who murdered Osiris treacherously. Terrible mother equals Typhon. Isis, however, set him free again. Horus thereupon rebelled, laid hands on his mother, and tore the regal ornaments from her head, whereupon Hermes gave her a cow's head. Then Horus conquered the Typhon a second time. Typhon, in the Greek legend, is a monstrous dragon. Even without this confirmation, it is evident that the Battle of Horus is the typical battle of the sun hero with the whale dragon. Of the latter, we know that it is a symbol of the dreadful mother, of the voracious jaws of death, where men are dismembered and ground up. Footnote. Compare the exotic myths given by Fabinius, where the belly of the whale is cleared. It's clearly the land of death. End of footnote. Whoever vanquishes this monster has gained a new or eternal youth. For this purpose one must, in spite of all dangers, descend into the belly of the monster. Footnote. One of the fixed peculiarities of the Mar is that he can only get out of the hole through which he came in. This motive belongs evidently as the projected wish motive of the rebirth myth. End of footnote. So, the belly of the monster, the journey to hell, and spend some time there, imprisonment by night in the sea. The battle with the night serpent signifies, therefore, the conquering of the mother, who is suspected of an infamous crime, that is, the betrayal of the son. A full confirmation of the connection comes to us through the fragment of the Babylonic epic of the creation discovered by George Smith, mostly from the library of Assurbanipal. The period of the origin of the text was probably in the time of Hammurabi, 2000 before Christ. We learned from this account of creation that the sun god Ea, the son of the depths of the waters and the gods of wisdom, footnotes, abyss of wisdom, book of wisdom, source of fantasies, etc., had conquered Apsu. Apsu is the creator of the great gods. He existed in the beginning in a sort of trinity with Tiamat, the mother of gods, and Mumu, his vizier. Ea conquered the father, but Tiamat plotted revenge. She prepared herself for battle against the gods. Quote, Mother Hubor, who created everything, procured invincible weapons, gave birth to giant snakes with pointed teeth, relentless in every way, filled their bellies with poison instead of blood, furious gigantic lizards, clothed them with horrors, let them swell with the splendor of horror, formed them rearing. Whoever sees them shall die of terror, their bodies shall rear without turning to escape. She arrayed the lizards, dragons, and Laha men, hurricanes, mad dogs, and scorpion men, mighty storms, fishermen, and rams, with relentless weapons without fear of conflict, powerful. Tiamat's commands, irresistible are they. After Tiamat had powerfully done her work, she conceived evil against the gods, her descendants. In order to revenge Apsu, Tiamat did evil. When Ea now heard this thing, he became painfully anxious, sorrowfully he sat himself. He went to his father, his creator, Ansar, to relate to him all that Tiamat plotted. Tiamat, our mother, has taken an aversion to us, has prepared a riotous mob, furiously raging. End quote. The gods finally opposed Marduk, the god of spring, the victorious sun, against the fearful host of Tiamat. Marduk prepared for battle. Of his chief weapon, which he created, it is said, quote, "He created the evil wind, Imhulu, the south storm and the hurricane, the fourth wind, the seventh wind, the whirlwind, and the harmful wind. Then he let loose the winds, which he had created, the seven, to cause confusion with Tiamat. They followed behind him. Then the Lord took up the cyclone, his great weapon. For his chariot he mounted the storm wind, the incomparable, the terrible one." Unquote. His chief weapon is the wind and a net, with which he will entangle Tiamat. He approaches Tiamat and challenges to a combat. Quote. Then Tiamat and Murdoch, the wise one of the gods, came together, rising for the fight, approaching to the battle. Then the Lord spread out his net and caught her. He let loose Imahula in his train at her face. Then Tiamat now opened her mouth as wide as she could. He let Imahula rush in so that her lips could not close. With the raging winds he filled her womb. Her inner parts were seized, and she opened wide her mouth, and he touched her with the spear and dismembered her body. He slashed her inward parts and cut out her heart, subdued her and put an end to her life. He threw her body down and stepped upon it. Unquote. After Marduk slew the mother, he devised the creation of the world. Quote, There the world rested contemplating her body. There the Lord rested contemplating her body. Then divided he the colossus, planning wisely. He cut it apart like a flat fish into two parts. Footnote. Cleavage of the mother. See Kaineus, also rift, chasm equals division of the earth, and so on. So he cut her into two parts. One half he took, and with it he covered the heavens. End of quote. In this matter, Marduk created the universe from the mother. It is clearly evident that the killing of the mother dragon here takes place under the idea of a wind fecundation with negative accompaniments. The world is created from the mother, that is to say, from the libido taken away from the mother through sacrifice. We shall have to consider this significant formula more closely in the last chapter. The most interesting parallels to this primitive myth are to be found in the literature of the Old Testament, as Gunkel has brilliantly pointed out. It is worthwhile to trace the psychology of these two parallels. Isaiah. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord, awake, as in the ancient days, in the generations of old. Art thou not it that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon? Art thou not it which hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, that hath made the depths of the sea a way for the ransom to pass over? End of quote. The name of Rahab is frequently used for Egypt in the Old Testament, also dragon. Isaiah chapter 30 verse 7 calls Egypt, quote, the silent Rahab, unquote, and means therefore something evil and hostile. Rahab is the well-known whore of Jericho, who later, as the wife of Prince Salma, became the ancestress of Christ. Here Rahab appeared as the old dragon, as Tiamat, against whose evil power Murdoch or Jehovah marched forth. The expression, quote, the ransomed, unquote, refers to the Jews freed from bondage, but it is also mythological, for the hero again frees those previously devoured by the whale, Frobenius. Psalm, 50, 60, 70, 89, 10. Quote, Thou hast broke Rahab in pieces as one that is slain. And then Job 26, 12 through 13. He divideth the sea with his power, and by his understanding he smiteth through the proud. By his spirit he hath garnished the heavens. His hand hath formed the crooked serpent. Unquote. Gunkel places Rahab as identical with chaos, that is, the same as Tiamat. Gunkel translates, quote, the breaking to pieces, unquote, as violation. Tiamat Rahab, as the mother, is also the whore. Gilgamesh treats Ishtar in this way when he accuses her of whoredom. This insult towards his mother is very familiar to us from dream analysis. The dragon Rahab appears also as Leviathan, the water monster, maternal sea. Psalm 74. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting in the wilderness. Thou didst cleave the fountain and the flood, thou didst dry up mighty rivers. While only the phallic meaning of the Leviathan were emphasized in the first part of this work, we now discover also the maternal meaning. A further parallel is Isaiah 27:1. In that day the Lord with his cruel and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. We come upon a special motive in Job chapter 41, verse 1. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook in his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Numerous parallels to this motive are to be found among exotic myths in Frobenius, where the maternal sea monster who was fished for. The comparison of the mother libido with the elementary powers of the sea and the powerful monsters born by the earth show how invincibly great is the power of the libido, which we designate as maternal. We have already seen that the incest prohibition prevents the son from reproducing himself through his mother, but this must be done by a god, as is shown with remarkable clearness and candor in the pious Egyptian mythology, which has preserved the most ancient and simple concepts. Thus, Chunum, the moulder, the potter, the architect, molds his eggs upon the potter's wheel, for he is the immortal growth, the reproduction of himself and his own rebirth, the creator of the egg which emerged from the primitive waters. In the Book of the Dead it says, I am the sublime falcon, the sun god, which has come forth from his egg. Another passage in the Book of the Dead reads, I am the creator of Nun, who has taken his place in the underworld. My nest is not seen and my egg is not broken. A further passage reads, that great and noble God in his egg, who in his own originator of that which has arisen from him. So I'll say that again. That great and noble God in his egg, who is his own originator of that which has arisen from him. Okay. Therefore, the god Nagaga Urer is also called the Great Cackler, Book of the Dead. Quote, I cackle like a goose and I whistle like a falcon. Unquote. The mother is reproached with the same incest prohibition as an act of willful maliciousness by which she excludes the son from immortality. Therefore, a god must at least rebel, overpower, or chastise the mother. Compare Adam and Lilith. The overpowering signifies incestuous rape. Footnote. In a pyramid text which depicts the battle of the dead pharaoh for the dominance of heavens, it reads, Heaven weeps, the stars tremble, the guards of the gods tremble and their servants flee when they see the king rise as a spirit, as a god, who lives upon his fathers and conquers his mothers. Cited by Dietrich in Mithraisili liturgy. Okay, end of footnote. So, the overpowering signifies incestuous rape. Herodotus has preserved for us a valuable fragment of this religious fantasy. Quote, and how they celebrate their feasts to Isis in the city of Busiris, I have already previously remarked. After the sacrifice, all of them, men and women, full 10,000 people, begin to beat each other, but it would be sin for me to mention for whom they do beat each other. But in Pamprimus, they celebrated the sacrifice with holy actions, as in other places. About the time when the sun sets, some few priests are busy around the image. Most of them stand at the entrance with wooden clubs, and others who would fulfill a vow, more than 1,000 men, also stand in a group with wooden cudgels opposite them. Now, on the eve of the festival, they take the image out in a small and gilded temple into another sacred edifice. Then the few who remain with the image draw a four-wheeled chariot upon which the temple stands with the image which it encloses, but the others who stand in the anterooms are not allowed to enter. Those under a vow who stand by the god beat them off. Now occurs a furious battle with clubs in which they bruise each other's bodies and, as I believe, many even die from their wounds. Notwithstanding this, the Egyptians consider that none die. The natives claim that this festival gathering was introduced for the following reason. In the sanctuary lived the mother of Ares. Footnotes. By Ares, the Egyptian typhon is probably meant. And a footnote. Now Ares was brought up abroad, and when he became a man, he came to have intercourse with his mother. The servants of his mother, who had seen him, did not allow him to enter peacefully, but prevented him, at which he fetched people from another city who mistreated the servants and had entrance to his mother. Therefore they asserted that this slaughter was introduced at the feast for Ares. End of quote. It is evident that the pious here fight their way to a share in the mystery of the raping of the mother. Footnote. In the Polynesian Maui myth, the act of the sun hero is very plain. He robs his mother of her girdle. The robbery of the veil in myths of this type of the swan maiden has the same significance. In the African myth of Joruba, the sun hero simply ravishes his mother. End of footnote. This is the part which belongs to them. Footnote. The previously mentioned myth of Halirohotius, who destroyed himself when he wished to cut down the holy tree of Athens, the Moria, contains the same psychology. Also, the priestly castration, Attis castration, in the service of the Great Mother. The aesthetic self-torture in Christianity has its origins, as is self-evident, in these sources because the Christians' form of symbol means a very intensive regression to the mother incest. End of footnote. So this is the part which belongs to them, while the heroic deed belongs to the god. So the footnote to this is the tearing off from the tree of life is just this sin. By Ares is meant the Egyptian typhon, as we have good reason to suppose. Thus, typhon represents the evil longing for the mother, with which other myth forms reproaches the mother, according to the well-known example. The death of Balder, quite analogous to the death of Osiris, attack of a sickness of Re, because of the wounding by the branch of the mistletoe, seems to need a similar explanation. It is recounted in the myth how all creatures were pledged not to hurt Balder, only to save only the mistletoe, which was forgotten, presumably because it was too young. This killed Balder. Mistletoe is a parasite. The female piece of wood in the fire bonding ritual was obtained from the wood of a parasitical or creeping plant, the fire mother. The mare rests upon Maritak, in which Grimm suspects the mistletoe. The mistletoe was a remedy against barrenness. In Gaul, the druid alone was allowed to climb the holy oak amid solemn ceremonies after a completed sacrifice in order to cut off the ritual mistletoe. This act is a religiously limited and organized incest. That which grows on the tree is the child. Footnote. Therefore, in England, mistletoe boughs were hung up at Christmas, mistletoe as a rod of life. End of footnote. So that which grows on the tree is the child, which man might have by the mother, then man himself would be in a renewed and rejuvenated form, and precisely this is what man cannot have because the incest prohibition forbids it. As the Celtic custom shows, the act is performed by the priest only, with the observation of certain ceremonies. The hero god and the redeemer of the world, however, do the unpermitted, the superhuman thing, and through it purchase immortality. The dragon, who must be overcome for this purpose, means, as must have been for some time clearly seen, the resistance against incest. Dragon and serpent, especially with the characteristic accumulation of anxiety attributes, are the symbolic representations of anxiety, which correspond to the repressed incest wish. It is therefore intelligible when we come across a tree with a snake again and again. In paradise, the snake even tempts to sin. The snake or dragon possess in particular the meaning of treasure, guardian, and defender. The phallic, as well as the feminine meaning of the dragon, footnote. So just as the tree has the phallic nature as well as the maternal significance, so in myths the demonic old woman, she may be favorable or malicious, often has phallic attributes. For example, a long toe, a long tooth, a long lips, long fingers, pendulous breasts, long hands, large feet, large hands, so on. This mixture of male and female motives has reference to the fact that the old woman is a libido symbol like the tree, generally determined as maternal. The bisexuality of the libido is expressed in the clearest form in the idea of the three witches who collectively possess one eye and one tooth. This idea is directly parallel to the dream of the patient who represents her libido as twins, one of which is a box, the other a bottle-like object, for eye and tooth represent male and female genitals. Relative to eye in this connection, see especially the Egyptian myths referring to teeth. It is to be observed that Adonis, fecundity, died by a boar's tooth, like Sigfield by Hagen's spear, compared with this with Veronese papyrus, whose phallus was bitten by a snake. Tooth in this sense, like the snake, is a negative phallus. So we'll go to the beginning of that very long footnote, beginning to the sentence again. So it starts out, the phallic as well as the feminine meaning of the dragon, there was a footnote, indicates that this is again a symbol of the sexual neutral or bisexual libido, that is to say, a symbol of the libido in opposition. In this significance, the black horse, Apohasha, the demon of opposition, appears in the old Persian song Tishtriya, where it obstructs the sounds of the rain lake. The white horse Trishtriya makes two futile attempts to vanquish Apaosha. At the third attempt, with the help of Ahura Mazda, he is successful. Footnote. Compare Grimm. The same motive in another application is found in the Loch Saxon legend. Once a young ash tree grew unnoticed in the wood. Each New Year's Eve, a white knight upon a white horse rides up to cut down the young shoot. At the same time, a black knight arrives and engages him in combat. After a lengthy conflict, the white knight succeeds in overcoming the black knight, and the white knight cuts down the young tree. But sometimes the white knight will be unsuccessful, and then the ash will grow, and then it becomes large enough to allow a horse to be tied under it. And then a powerful king will come, and a tremendous battle will occur. Destruction of the world. So, end of footnote. So we'll go back to the beginning of the sentence. The white horse, Trishtriya, makes two futile attempts to vanquish Apaosha. At the third attempt, with the help of Ahura Mazda, he is successful. Whereupon the sluices of heaven open and a fruitful rain pours down on the earth. In this song one sees very beautifully, in the choice of symbol, how libido is opposed to libido, will against will, this discordance of primitive man with himself, which he recognizes again and again in all the adversity and contrast of external nature. The symbol of the tree encoiled by the serpent may also be translated as the mother defended from incest by resistance. This symbol is by no means rare upon Mithric monuments. The rock encircled by a snake is to be comprehended similarly, because Mithra is born from rock. The menace of the newborn by the snake Mithra Hercules is made clear through the legend of Lilith and Lamia, Python, the dragon of Leto and Poini, who devastates the land of Crotopus, are sent by the father of the newborn. This idea indicates the localization well known in psychoanalysis of the incest anxiety in the father. The father represents an active repulse of the incest wish of the son. The crime, unconsciously wished for by the son, is imputed to the father under the guise of a pretended murderous purpose, this being the cause of the mortal fear of the son for the father, of frequent neurotic symptoms. In conformity with this idea, the monster to be overcome by the young hero is frequently a giant, the guardian of a treasure, or the woman. A striking example is the giant Chumbaba in the Gilgamesh epic, who protected the garden of Ishtar. He is overcome by Gilgamesh, whereby Ishtar is won. Thereupon she makes erotic advances towards Gilgamesh. This data should be sufficient to render intelligible the role of Horus and Plutarch, especially the violent usage of Isis. Through overpowering the mother, the hero becomes equal to the son. He reproduces himself. He wins the strength of the invincible sun, the power of eternal rejuvenation. We thus understand a series of representations from the myth on the Hedernheim relief. So here it's a relief, Mithras sacrificing to the bull, and it's a picture of a man with a cape that looks like wings sacrificing the bull holding it by the nostrils and cutting its throat, and then around it are images of busts and also of trees and people with the trees. So that's the end of that. So back to the text. There we see, first of all, the birth of Mithra from the top of the tree. The next representation shows him carrying the conquered bull, comparable to the monstrous bull overcome by Gilgamesh. This bull signifies the concentrated significance of the monster, the father, who, as giant and dangerous animal, embodies the incest prohibition, and agrees with the individual libido of the sun hero, which he overcomes by self-sacrifice. The third picture represents Mithra, when he grasps the head ornament of the sun, the nimbus. This act recalls to us, first of all, the violence of Horus towards Isis, secondly, the Christian basic thought that those who have overcome attain the crown of eternal life. In the fourth picture, Sol kneels before Mithra. These last two representations show plainly that Mithra has taken to himself the strength of the sun, so that he becomes the lord of the sun as well. He has conquered his animal nature, the bull. The animal knows no incest prohibition. Man is, therefore, man because he conquers the incest wish, that is, the animal nature. Thus Mithra has sacrificed his animal nature, the incest wish, and with that has overcome the mother, that is to say, the terrible death-bringing mother. A solution is already anticipated in the Gilgamesh epic through the formal renunciation of the horrible Ishtar by the hero. The overcoming of the mother in the Mithric sacrifice, which had almost an aesthetic character, took place no longer by an archaic overpowering, but through the renunciation, the sacrifice of the wish. The primitive thought of incestuous reproduction through entrance into the mother's womb has already been displaced, because man was so far advanced in domestication that he believed that eternal life of the son is reached not through the perpetration of incest, but through the sacrifice of the incest wish. This important change expressed in the mythic mystery finds its full expression for the first time in the symbol of the crucified God. A bleeding human sacrifice was hung on the tree of life for Adam's sin. Footnote. In the Cilician Passionale of the 5th century, Christ dies on the same tree which was connected with Adam's sin. End of footnote. The firstborn sacrifices its life to the mother when he suffers, hanging on the branch, a disgraceful and painful death, a mode of death which belongs to the most ignominious forms of execution, which Roman antiquity had reserved for only the lowest criminal. Thus the hero dies, as if he had committed the most shameful crime. He does this by returning into the birth-giving branch of the tree of life, at the same time paying for his guilt with the pangs of death. The animal nature is repressed most powerfully in this deed of the highest courage and the greatest renunciation. Therefore, a great salvation is to be expected for humanity, because such a deed alone seems appropriate to expiate Adam's guilt. As has already been mentioned, the hanging of the sacrifice on the tree is generally widespread ritual custom, Germanic examples being especially abundant. The ritual consists in the sacrifice being pierced by a spear. Footnote. For example, animal skins were hung on the sacrificial trees, and afterwards spears were thrown at them. End of footnote. Thus it is said of Odin, quote, I know that I hung on the windswept tree 9 nights through, wounded by a spear, dedicated to Odin, I myself to myself. End of footnote. End of quote. The hanging of the sacrifice to the cross also occurred in America prior to its discovery. Mueller mentioned the Fejrarian manuscript, a Mexican hieroglyphic codex, at the conclusion of which there is a colossal cross, in the middle of which there hangs a bleeding divinity. Equally interesting is the cross of Palenque. Up above is a bird, on either side 2 human figures, who look at the cross and hold a child against it either for sacrifice or baptism. The old Mexicans are said to have invoked the favor of San Teotlis, quote, the daughter of heaven and the goddess of wheat, every spring by nailing upon the cross a youth or a maiden, and by shooting the sacrifice with arrows. The name of the Mexican cross signifies, quote, tree of our life or flesh, unquote. An effigy from the island of Philae represents Osiris in the form of a crucified god, wept over by Isis and Nephthys, the sister consort. The meaning of the cross is certainly not limited to the tree of life, as has already been shown. Just as the tree of life also has a phallic submeaning, the libido symbol, so there is a further significance to the cross than life and immortality. Footnote. In the representation of the birth of a king in Luxor, one sees the following, quote, the Logos and the messenger of the gods, the bird-headed Thoth, makes known to the maiden queen Mautmis that she is to give birth to a son. In the following scene, Knef and Author hold the crux ansata to her mouth so that she may be impregnated by this in a spiritual, symbolic manner. End of footnote. Mueller uses it as a sign of rain or of fertility because it appears among the Indians distinctly as a magic charm of fertility. It goes without saying, therefore, that it plays a role in the sun cult. It is also noteworthy that the sign of the cross is an important sign for the keeping away of all evil, like the ancient gesture of Malefica. The phallic amulets also serve the same purpose. Zocher appeared to have overlooked the fact that the phallic crux ansata is the same cross which has flourished in the countless examples in the soil of antiquity. Copies of the crux ansata are found in many places, and almost every collection of antiquities possesses one or more of the species. Footnote: the statues of the phallic Hermes, used as a boundary stones, were often in the form of a cross with the head pointed. In Old English, the cross is called rod. End of footnote. Finally, it must be mentioned that the form of the human body is imitated in the cross of a man with arms outspread. It is remarkable that in early Christian representations, Christ is not nailed to the cross, but stands before it with arms outstretched. Footnote. Robertson mentions the fact that the Mexican priests and sacrificers clothed themselves in the skin of a slain woman, placed themselves with arms outstretched, with arms stretched out like a cross before the god of war. Ugh, it's terrible. All right. So Christ is not nailed to the cross, but stands before it with arms outstretched. And Maurice, footnote, Indian Antiquities, gives a striking basis for this interpretation when he says, quote, it is a fact not less remarkable than well attested that the Druids in their groves were accustomed to select the most stately and beautiful tree as an emblem of the deity they adored, and cutting off the sides of their branches, they affixed two of the largest of them to the highest part of the trunk, in such a manner that those branches extended on each side like the arms of a man, and together with the body presented the appearance of a huge cross, and in the bark in several places also was inscribed the letter T. Footnote, the primitive Egyptian cross form is meant T, Tau, tree of knowledge, end of footnote, the tree of knowledge, quote unquote, the tree of knowledge, of the Hindu Dashayana sect assumes human form. It was represented as a mighty thick trunk in the form of a human head, and from the top of which grew out two longer branches hanging down on the sides, and one short vertical uprising branch crowned by a crowned by a bud or blossoming like thickening. So Zocher says, footnote, the bud is plainly phallic. See the above-mentioned dream of the young woman. End of footnote. Robertson, in his Evangelical Ms., mentions that the Assyrian system there exists the representation of the divinity in the form of a cross, in which the vertical beam corresponds to a human form and the horizontal beam to a pair of conventionalized wings. Old Grecian idols, such, for example, as were found in large numbers in Aegea, have similar character: an immoderately long head, and arms slightly raised, wing-shaped, and in the front distinct breasts. I must leave it an open question as to whether the symbol of the cross has any relation to the two pieces of wood in the religious fire production, as is frequently claimed. It does appear, however, as if the cross symbol actually still possesses the significance of union, for this idea belongs to the fertility charm and especially to the thought of eternal rebirth, which is most intimately bound up with the cross. The thought of union expressed by the symbol of the cross is met with in Timaeus of Plato, where the world soul is conceived as stretched out between heaven and earth in the form of an X chi, hence in the form of a St. Andrew's cross. When we now learn, furthermore, that the world soul contained in itself the world as a body, then this picture inevitably reminds us of the mother. Dialogues from Plato. And in the center he put the soul, which he diffused through the whole, and also spread all over the body round about it. And he made one solitary and only heaven, a circle moving in a circle, having such excellence as to be able to hold converse with itself, and needing no other friendship or acquaintance. Having these purposes in view, he created the world to be a blessed God. End of quote. This highest degree of inactivity and freedom from desire, symbolized by the being enclosed within itself, signifies divine blessedness. The only human prototype of this conception is the child in the mother's womb, or, rather more, the adult man in the continuous embrace of the mother from whom he originates. Corresponding to this mythologic philosophic conception, the enviable Diogenes inhabited a tub, thus giving a mythologic expression to the blessedness and resemblance to the divine in his freedom from desire. Plato says as follows of the bonds of the world soul to the world body. I am indebted for my that's not what he says. He says, I was reading a footnote. So Plato says, now God did not make the soul after the body, although we have spoken of them in this order. For when he put them together, he would never have allowed that the elder should serve the younger. But this is what we say at random, because we ourselves too are very largely affected by chance. Whereas he made the soul in origin and excellent prior to and older than the body, to be a ruler and mistress, of whom the body was to be the subject. End of quote. It seems conceivable from other indications that the conception of the soul in general is a derivative of the mother imago, that is to say, a symbolic designation for the amount of libido remaining in the mother imago. Compare the Christian representation of the soul as the bride of Christ. Further development of the word soul in Timaeus takes place in an obscure fashion in mystic numerals. When the mixture was completed, the following occurred. This entire compound he divided lengthwise into two parts, which he joined to one another at the center like the figure of an X. Unquote. This passage approaches very closely the division and union of Atman, who, after his division, is compared to a man and a woman, who hold each other in an embrace. Another passage is worth mentioning. Quote, after the entire union of the soul had taken place, according to the master's mind, he formed all that is corporeal with this, and joined it together so as to penetrate it throughout. End quote. Moreover, I refer to my remarks about the maternal meaning of this word soul in Plotinus, chapter 2. A similar detachment of the symbol of the cross from a concrete figure we find among the Muxhogian Indians, who stretch above the surface of the water, pond, or stream, two ropes crosswise at the point of intersection, thrown into the water fruits, oil, and precious stones as a sacrifice. Here the divinity is evidently the water, not the cross, which designates the place with sacrifice only, through the point of intersection. The sacrifice at the place of the union indicates why the symbol was a primitive charm of fertility. Footnote, the sacrifice is submerged in the water, that is, in the mother. So the sacrifice at the place of the union indicates why the symbol was a primitive charm of fertility, why we meet it so frequently in the pre-Christian era among the goddess of love, mother goddess, especially the Egyptian Isis and the sun god. We have already discussed the continuous union of the two divinities. As the cross, Tau or T, crux ansata, always recurs in the hand of Tum, the supreme god, the hegemon of the Ennead, it may not be superfluous to say something more of the destination of Tum. The tomb of Leopolis bears the name the father of his mother. What that means needs no explanation. Jesus, or Nebet Hotpet, the goddess joined to him, was called sometimes the mother, sometimes the daughter, sometimes the wife of the god. The day of the beginning of autumn is designated in the Heliopolitan inscriptions as the festival of the goddess Jesusit, as the arrival of the sister for the purpose of uniting with her father. It is the day in which the goddess Mehit completes her work, so that the goddess Osiris may enter into the left eye, by which the moon is meant. Footnote. Compare later the moon as gathering places of souls, the Divine Mother. The day is also called the filling up of the sacred eye with its needs. The heavenly cow with the moon eye, the cow-headed Isis, takes to herself in the autumn equinox the seed which procreates Horus. Moon as the keeper of the seed. The eye evidently represents the genitals, as in the myth of Indra, who had to bear spread over his entire whole body the likeness of Yoni, vulva, on account of the Bathsheba outrage, but was so far pardoned by the gods that this disgraceful likeness of Yoni was changed into eyes. Footnote. Compare here with what Abraham has to say in reference to pupilla, dreams and myths. So, end of footnote. The pupil in the eye is a child. The great god becomes a child again. He enters the mother's womb in order to renew himself. Footnote. Retreat of Re upon the heavenly cow. In the Hindu rite of purification, the patient must creep through the artificial cow in order to be born anew. In the hymn, end of footnote, it is said, "Thy mother, the heaven, stretches forth her arms to thee." In another place it is said, Thou shinest, O Father of the gods, upon the back of thy mother. Daily thy mother takes thee in her arms. When thou illuminest the dwelling of night, thou unitest with thy mother, the heavens. End of quote. The tomb of Pitum Heliopolis not only bears the crux ansata as a symbol, but also this sign as his most frequent surname, that is Anx or Anxi, which means life or the living. He is chiefly honored as the demon serpent Agatho, of whom it is said, the holy demon serpent Agatho goes forth from the city of Nezi. The snake, on account of casting its skin, is a symbol of renewal, as is the Scarabaeus, the symbol of the sun, of whom it is said that he, being a masculine sex only, reproduces himself. The name Chunum, another name for Tum, always meaning the sun god, comes from the verb xunum, which means to bind together or to unite. Chunum appears chiefly as the potter, the molder of his egg. The cross seems, therefore, to be an extraordinarily condensed symbol. Its supreme meaning is that of the tree of life, and therefore a symbol of the mother. The symbolization in a human form is therefore intelligible. The phallic forms of the crux ansata belong to the abstract meaning of life and fertility, as well as the meaning of union, which we can now very properly interpret as cohabitation with the mother for the purpose of renewal. Footnote. One need not be amazed at this formula, because it is the animal in us, the primitive forces of which appear in religion. In this connection, Dietrich's words take on an especially important aspect. Quote, the old thoughts come from below in new force in the history of religion. The revolution from below creates a new life of religion in primitive, indestructible forms. End of footnote. It is, therefore, not only very touching, but also very significant naive symbolism when Mary, in the Old English lamentation of the Virgin, dispute between Mary and the cross, when Mary, in the Old English lamentation of the Virgin, accuses the cross of being a false tree, which unjustly and without a reason destroyed, quote, the pure fruit of her body, her gentle birdling, unquote, with a poisonous draught, the draught of death, which is destined only for the guilty descendants of the sinner Adam. Her son was not a sharer in that guilt. Compare with the cunning of Isis, with the fatal draught of love. Mary laments, quote, cross, Thou art the evil stepmother of my son, so high hast thou hung him, that I cannot even kiss his feet. Cross, thou art my mortal enemy. Thou hast slain my little blue bird. The Holy Cross answers, Woman, I thank thee for my honor. Thy splendid fruit, which now I bear, shine as a red blossom. And there's a footnote, a very beautiful representation of the blood-red sun sinking into the sea. So, not alone to save thee, but to save the whole world, this precious flower blooms in thee. Footnote, Jesus appears here as a branch and a bud in the tree of life. Compare here the interesting reference to Robertson evangelical myths in regards to Jesus the Nazarene, a title which he derives from Nazar or Netzarek, branch. End of footnote. Center Crook says of the relation to each other of the two mothers, Isis in the morning and Isis in the evening, quote, Thou hast been crowned as Queen of Heaven on account of the child which thou hast borne, but I shall appear as the shining relic to the whole world at the day of judgment. I shall then rise my lament for the divine Son innocently slain upon me. End of quote. Thus the murderous mother of death unites with the mother of life in bringing forth a child. In their lament for the dying God, and as an outward token of their union, Mary kisses the cross and is reconciled to it. Footnote. In Greece, the pail of torture on which the criminal was stretched or punished was termed exate Hecate, the subterranean mother of death. End of footnote. The naive Egyptian antiquity has preserved for us the union of the contrasting tendencies in the mother idea of Isis. Naturally, this imago is merely a symbol of the libido of the son for the mother and describes the conflict between love and incest resistance. The criminal incestuous purpose of the son appears projected as a criminal cunning in the mother imago. The separation of the son from the mother signifies the separation of man from the generic consciousness of animals and from the infantile archaic thought characterized by the absence of individual consciousness. It was only the power of the incest prohibition which created the self-conscious individual, who formerly had been thoughtlessly one with the tribe, and in this way alone did the idea of individual and final death become possible. Thus through the sin of Adam, death came into the world. This, as is evident, is expressed figuratively, that is, in contrast form. The mother's defense against the incest appears to the son as a malicious act, which delivers him over to the fear of death. This conflict faces us in the Gilgamesh epic in its original freshness and passion, where also the incest wish is projected onto the mother. The neurotic who cannot leave the mother has good reasons. The fear of death holds him there. It seems as if no idea and no word were strong enough to express the meaning in this. Entire religions were constructed in order to give words to the immensity of this conflict. The struggle for expression which continued down through the centuries certainly cannot have its source in the restricted realm of the vulgar conception of incest. Rather, one must understand the law, which is ultimately expressed as incest prohibition, as coercion to domestication, and consider the religious systems as institutions which first receive, then organize, and gradually sublimate the mother forces of the animal nature not immediately available for cultural purposes. We will now return to the visions of Miss Miller. Those now following need no further detailed discussion. The next vision in the image is the image of a purple bay. The symbolism of the sea connects smoothly with that which precedes. One might think here, in addition to the reminiscences of the Bay of Naples, which we came across in Part 1, in the sequence of the whole, however, we must not overlook the significance of the bay. In French it is called une baie, which probably corresponds to a bay in the English text. It might be worthwhile here to glance at the etymological side of this idea. Bay is generally used for something which is open, just as the Catalonian word badia, bae, comes from bader, to open. In French, baillir means to have the mouth open, to gape. Another word for the same is meerbausen, bay or gulf, and Latin sinus, and a third word is gulf, in which the French stands in close relation to gouffre, abyss. Gulf is derived from xolpos. which also means bosom and womb and mother womb and vagina. It can also mean a fold of a dress or a pocket, and it may also mean a deep valley between high mountains, and these expressions clearly show what primitive ideas lie at their base. They render intelligible Goethe's choice of words at that place where Faust wishes to follow the sun with wing and desire in the everlasting day to drink its eternal light. And here I quote, "The mountain chain with its gorges deep would then no more impede my godlike motion, and now before mine eyes expands the ocean with all its bays, its shining sheep." End of quote. Faust's desire, like that of every hero, inclines towards the mysteries of rebirth, of immortality. Therefore his course leads to the sea, and down into the monstrous jaws of death, the horror and the narrowness of which at the same time signify the new day. Quote, "Out on the open ocean speeds my dreaming, the glassy flood before my feet is gleaming. A new day beckons to the newer shore, a fiery chariot borne on buoyant pinions. Sweeps near me now, I soon shall ready be to pierce the ether's high, unknown dominions, to reach new spheres of pure activity. This godlike rapture, this supreme existence. Yes, let me dare those gates to fling asunder, which every man would fain go slinking by. 'Tis time through deeds this word of truth to thunder, that with the height of God's man's dignity may vie. Nor from that gloomy gulf to shrink affrighted, where fancy doth herself be self-born pangs compel, to struggle towards that pass benighted, around whose narrow mouth flame all the fires of hell. To take this step with cheerful resolution, through nothingness, should be the certain swift conclusion." And it sounds like a confirmation with a succeeding vision of Miss Miller is... it sounds like a confirmation when the succeeding vision of Miss Miller is une falaise à pic, a steep precipitous cliff. Compare gouffre. The entire series of individual visions is completed, as the author observes, by a confusion of sounds somewhat resembling wama, wama. This has a very primitive, barbaric sound. Since we learn from the author nothing of the subjective roots of this sound, nothing is left us but the suspicion that the sound might be considered, taken in connection with the whole, a slight mutilation of the well-known call, "Mama." Reader's commentary, very briefly. I really like this line on page 263 of Symbolism of Mother and of Rebirth. "It was only the power of the incest prohibition which created the self-conscious individual, who formerly had been thoughtlessly one with the tribe, and in this way alone did the idea of individual and final death become possible." So, it's hard to read this kind of stuff just because those kinds of impulses are so socially and sort of, we know now, like biologically not healthy and socially condemned. So, and it's hard to read things that are, saying that generally people do this, or this is how to interpret it this way, because we know, like with dreams, things can be more than one thing at the same time. That said, I really like what I got out of this, which was about that we have that libido, that impulse is there, that energy is there, those desires are there, whether we acknowledge them or not, they're there, and that the path towards being an individual, and then I would say naturally what issues from that is fully individuating, is through restraint, something which humans have the ability to do. And I know that animals also have the ability to restrain themselves. Like when you're feeding your dog, he doesn't immediately start eating the food. He restrains himself a little bit, or she restrains herself a little bit before she goes to the bowl, while you're putting the food in the bowl. But that we're able to take restraint, I think, and to examine it and to permanently restrain ourselves from something, I think is interesting. Thank you if you've listened.